Hello everyone. Today we are going to dive into 7 real-life cases, each of which has garnered public and media attention. While investigating each of these 7 cases, the detectives faced some challenges. However, evidence, witness testimony, and in some cases, surveillance footage eventually made it possible to get to the truth. In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in 2019 in Cedar Park, Texas. 30-year-old Amanda Gordon was living with her common-law husband, Samuel Bird, with whom she had 2 young children. Everything seemed to be going well in her life until she went missing. On December 12, 2019, when her mother noticed that she had not been in touch for more than 3 days, she reported her missing and asked the police to conduct a welfare check to solve the case and find out what happened to Amanda. Investigators used CCTV footage. In 2019, Amanda lived in this house with her 2-year-old son, 8-year-old daughter, and common-law husband Sam. 32-year-old Sam Bird owned a roofing company. He and Amanda had been together for 9 years. He was the father of her 2 children. Amanda had always kept in touch with her family, and so when she had not heard from her for 3 days, her mother, Deb Gordon, called the police and asked for a welfare check. The call came to the police on Thursday, December 12, 2019. Deb Gordon reported that she was concerned and that Amanda had told her that Sam had been physically and emotionally aggressive towards her throughout the relationship. A Cedar Park officer attempted to call Amanda Gordon after speaking with the mother but was unable to reach her. The affidavit says an emergency cell phone ping showed that Amanda had not used her phone since Tuesday, December 10th, and the last known location was within 500 meters of the home she shared with Sam Bird. It was already dark when the patrolman arrived at Amanda's house. They knocked on the door to see if anyone was there. Sam Bird was in the house. He told the patrol officer he wouldn't come out and talk to him. He could only talk to him through the window. The officer said the police were called by Amanda's mother and asked to see if she was okay and if her children were okay. Sam said the children were fine and that they were in the house with him. His brother Josiah was also in the residence with him, so there were 4 people inside, 2 adults and 2 children. The officer asked again about Amanda. Sam replied to the patrol officer that he was beginning to be concerned about Amanda's whereabouts. He expressed anger that she had just abandoned him with his 2 children, that she had just run away. The whole story and Sam's behavior seemed odd, and so the officer asked if he could walk the property to make sure nothing illegal had happened. But Sam responded by saying no. The police officer could see through the window that there was some disorder in the house. Thus, all of this added to the concern for Amanda's welfare. The patrolman also noticed that there appeared to be illegal substances being used in the house. There were serious concerns about the safety of the children, and so the patrol officers called for backup, after which they broke down the door and went inside the house. They checked the house and outbuildings, but Amanda was not there. However, there were pharmacy products and illegal substances, so Sam Bird was initially taken into custody on a charge of dealing in illegal substances. There was an outbuilding behind the house where Sam's office was located, and it was a serious concern because there were footprints leading to the office door. When the detectives went inside, they smelled a strong odor that suggested recent renovations. There was fresh varnish on the legs of the furniture and on the floor, as if the work had been done recently and very quickly. Sam hadn't moved a single piece, and all the furniture was in its proper place. It was unusual, however, that he had simply varnished it. The detectives continued to investigate the house and discovered something surprising. None of Amanda's belongings were there. The closet that was supposed to hold her clothes was empty. The shelves were empty, and the drawers contained only Sam's belongings. This discovery made the detectives seriously wonder what had happened to Amanda. Perhaps Sam wasn't lying, and Amanda really had packed up her things and left. Officers also spoke with a neighbor who told them Bird is not known to put trash out for collection. But on Thursday, December 12th, Bird put 2 full trash cans and 6 loose bags of trash on the street for collection. The neighbor also said that Josiah Bird, Sam's brother, had been at the house for some time and, in his opinion, was acting strangely. Detectives were looking for surveillance cameras that could help in the investigation of Amanda's disappearance. They found numerous outdoor surveillance cameras on the porch, by the door, and on the side wall of the house. Inside the house, they found brackets where wall cameras had been mounted until recently. Sam had acquired a rather extensive security system with several cameras. These cameras were lying on a table in the house. It was noticeable that the cameras had been removed from their mounting locations very recently and moved to the table. The police seized any items they thought might have any digital information stored on them. Detectives then turned their attention to the cars parked outside the house. However, they found no sign of Amanda's silver Lexus. There were only 2 cars parked in the driveway. One belonged to Sam and was used for his company, and the other belonged to his brother Josiah. Sam's car had a sticker on it advertising a local car wash, indicating that he had a subscription to the car wash. This allowed him to visit the car wash whenever he wanted, any day, any time of day. That might be helpful, so the detectives went to the car wash to see if Sam had stopped by there in the last few days. They did the right thing by deciding to examine the surveillance footage. According to the footage, Sam's pickup truck pulled up to the car wash shortly after 11:30 a.m. on December 11th. Detectives began reviewing the footage a few minutes before that time to see if he was alone in the car and if there was anything unusual about his behavior. So Sam arrived at the car wash on December 11th at 11:33 a.m. The footage from the other camera suggested that he was the only other person in the car. Detectives saw something suspicious and extremely strange on that footage. It was December and it was cold. When the detectives zoomed in, they saw that Sam was without shoes. Sam's unusual behavior was very disturbing. He looked disheveled, and the fact that he wasn't wearing shoes only added to the suspicion about him. If his wife had just left him, leaving him with 2 children, why was it more important for him to wash his truck? The detectives were eager to find answers to all of these questions. They needed to determine where Sam was and what he was doing on the days his wife allegedly left him. The video footage showed that his pickup truck was covered in a layer of dirt, and this dirt had a red tint to it. This indicated that he was using his truck for off-road trips outside of the neighborhood. The mud was not like the mud found in Cedar Park. After a thorough search of the house, the police concluded that Amanda was dead. During the press conference, the assistant police chief would not reveal details of the investigation, but the police had evidence that something bad had happened to Amanda. Based on the investigation and information obtained up to this point, we are sad to announce it is our belief that Amanda Gordon is deceased. At this point in the investigation, we are now treating this as a homicide, said Cedar Park Assistant Chief of Police Mike Harmon during a press conference.
Based on the investigation and information obtained up to this point, we are sad to announce it is our belief that Amanda Gordon is deceased.
Meanwhile, at the police station, investigators tried to question Sam. However, he flatly refused to answer questions and was uncooperative. His brother Josiah, on the other hand, was more talkative. He seemed extremely upset and shared the investigators' concerns about Amanda's whereabouts. According to Josiah, Sam informed him that Amanda had left 3 days ago, and he had been raising the children and working full-time since then. Josiah was not surprised to learn that Amanda had left Sam, as their relationship had been tumultuous with constant arguments. Sometimes she would leave, but she always came back. Josiah also told police officers that he and Sam had been doing a lot of cleaning in the past few days. He also revealed that Sam was in a relationship with a woman named Rachel, who had Amanda's car. It was crucial for the police to find Rachel, talk to her, and find out what she had to do with Amanda's disappearance. Rachel was surprised to see the police officers on her doorstep. She agreed to talk to the detectives and told them that she and Sam were having an affair. They asked her about Amanda. Rachel said that Sam had informed her that Amanda had gone away last weekend with a new boyfriend, and she had done that many times before. Rachel thought Amanda had just run away. She admitted that she had the keys to Amanda's car. The detectives wanted to know how she had Amanda's car and why it didn't bother her. At this point, Rachel began to tell a little more of the story. She reported that Sam had asked her to put an item in a certain place. Sam put the bag in the trunk of Amanda's car and asked Rachel to take it to a remote area that belonged to his family. She took officers to where she hid the bag, which the affidavit says contained a handgun, a spent shell casing, and Amanda's eyeglasses and cell phone. Rachel still maintained that she didn't quite know what was going on. She'd done it for Sam because he'd insisted that she'd do him a favor, but she remembered something else important. According to her, on December 11th, Sam had called her and asked her to bring cleaning supplies to his house. That was very suspicious. The area where the bag was found was thoroughly checked by the police, but nothing else was found. The next day, December 14th, Rachel expressed a desire to speak with detectives again and share new information. She revealed that she had made the decision to end her relationship with Sam. Rachel also admitted that she had not been completely forthright from the beginning. In fact, she saw the contents of the bag and asked Sam, "What's this all about? Why is there a gun and other items in there?" Sam explained to her that these items were a kind of insurance. As far as she knew, Sam had invested about $200,000 in a commercial transaction involving a recycling business. When she asked, "Insurance for what?" Sam replied that he was involved with business partners between whom there had been a large monetary exchange and was now being threatened. He said, "This bag will prove my innocence and set me free." Sam was concerned that a business deal he had invested in had fallen through. Because of this, he assumed there was a bounty on his head. Sam said the deal involved two brothers from Bastrop County, Texas. After talking to Rachel, investigators began looking for clues that could link Sam to these mysterious brothers from Bastrop County. Detectives discovered that on December 9th at 10:41 p.m., 2 days before Sam visited a car wash in Cedar Park, a license plate reader recorded his pickup truck heading into Bastrop County. Based on this information, detectives drove the same route, hoping to find video of Sam's pickup truck. They were able to locate several gas stations with surveillance cameras installed. Sam's pickup truck had his company's advertising on it, making it much easier to identify the vehicle. Detectives began reviewing the videotape taken on December 9th. At approximately 11 p.m., they saw Sam's pickup truck on the monitor. They confirmed that Sam Bird's vehicle had indeed traveled south on the night of December 9th and would have ended up in Bastrop County if it had continued driving. The camera captured Sam's truck a second time 12 hours later, on December 10th, as it was driving back to Cedar Park. Now detectives wanted to understand what Sam had been doing during that 12-hour period. Bastrop County, located in the state of Texas, covers 900 square miles and has more than 2,000 farms and ranches. Investigators sought to determine what part of the county Sam traveled to on December 9th. In the first days after Amanda's disappearance, they reached out to the local media for help, asking for any information that could help in locating her. Shortly afterward, the detective received an anonymous phone call. The caller stated that there was a business partnership involving the only recycling plant in Bastrop County. The anonymous informant pointed to a specific ranch. It became a priority for the police to investigate this ranch. A check revealed that it was owned by brothers who may have had their own recycling business. Detectives got the phone numbers and address of the brothers and contacted one of them by phone. He was very kind and said he knew Sam. They had been business partners for quite some time. The brothers agreed to have the detectives come and look at the ranch. When detectives arrived at the ranch in Bastrop County, their attention was immediately drawn to the dirt. The color of the soil matched the dirt on Sam's pickup truck that they had seen on the car wash camera footage on December 11th. The brothers revealed that Sam traveled to the ranch often. They explained that Sam had a mobile home on the property, which he used to date women with whom he had romantic relationships. One of the brothers recalled receiving a message from Sam on December 9th. In that message, Sam requested permission to burn the trash. the brothers showed detectives the location where the burn pit was located. It was a large area where various items had apparently once been burned. Detectives proceeded to examine the remains of the fire and soon discovered small fragments of shattered bone. They were able to confirm that these were human bones. Further searches involving experts and search dogs led to the discovery of other bones and jewelry, some of which had been deformed by the fire. The evidence was found not only in the remains of the fire but also in a pond, which the police had to drain. The jewelry was identified by Amanda's family. Dental and DNA testing left no doubt that Amanda Gordon was dead.
The initial finding is that the remains were found in a burn pit, and it is clear through the investigation there were measures taken to dispose of the evidence. We are as confident as possible without DNA confirmation that the remains are those of Amanda Gordon.
At the police department, forensic experts retrieved data from Sam's home surveillance system. Detectives analyzed the footage in search of clues that might reveal the cause of Amanda's death. Sam made every effort to delete as much data as possible, but the experts were able to recover important recordings. The camera was set up in the backyard, between the rear of the main building and the additional structure where Sam set up his office. The camera captured movement at 11:54 p.m. on December 8th. Amanda ran out of the house and into the office. The video showed Sam chasing after her. Shortly thereafter, detectives saw Sam moving around the backyard and house in just her underwear. Amanda did not appear in the footage again. It was the middle of the night. He was in one pair of underwear and acting very strange. Detectives reviewed the footage from the following morning, December 9th. Sam was pacing back and forth between the main house and the office. In the afternoon, he was already busy cleaning the house. Toward evening, around 5:30 p.m., he is seen curling up in the yard as if he was about to vomit. After the sun set, the camera switched to night mode. At 7:46 p.m., Sam turned off the porch light that illuminated the backyard so he wouldn't be seen by neighbors or people driving by on the road. Apparently, he was moving some things around the area where his pickup truck was parked. He eventually turned off the security cameras. Sam then dismantled his security system to erase the evidence of what happened to Amanda. But he missed one thing. An interesting feature of his security system was that when it detected motion, it would take a snapshot and send it to his cell phone. Sam deleted the video, but the 4 snapshots remained on his phone. The first image was fuzzy because it was taken when Amanda was running. It's pretty hard to see her because she's in motion. Sam is not visible in this picture. In the next shot, we can see Sam on the right side of the frame. Amanda's legs were also visible in the frame. A puddle of something that looked like blood was seen at the other end of the room. In the next shot, the detective saw Sam move Amanda's body closer to the door and lean over her. They saw an obvious trauma to the area of her head. In the next picture, they saw Sam standing next to Amanda's body. He was wearing only his underwear. Detectives were now certain that Sam Bird took Amanda Gordon's life. He was charged with multiple counts. Investigators found no evidence that Josiah Bird, Rachel, or the brothers from the ranch had knowledge of or had anything to do with what happened to Amanda. Therefore, no charges were filed against them. The only person who was charged was Sam Bird. Rachel was called as a witness. Josiah Bird also testified. Business associates were also questioned as witnesses. All the threads led back to Sam Bird, and he was the one who was blamed for Amanda's death. Detectives attempted to reconstruct the chronology of events that led to Amanda's death. Authorities believe that on December 8th, she returned home, went inside, and had a conversation with Sam. There was an argument related to their relationship. Supposedly, this made Sam very angry, at which point he pulled out a gun. Amanda got scared and ran out of the house and into Sam's office. He chased her, and most likely he hit her in the head with the handle of the gun. But that wasn't enough, and he shot her. When he realized he had done something terrible, he didn't try to call 911. Instead, he began taking actions he thought would cover up the crime. He needed to hide the body. He disabled the security cameras and then loaded Amanda's body, along with other evidence, into his pickup truck. He then drove to a ranch in Bastrop County, where he hoped to destroy all traces of the crime by means of fire. According to the affidavit for the tampering with evidence charge Byrd is facing, forensics teams found positive tests for blood on the floor, walls, items, entryway, deck, and steps leading to the deck of the shed, as well as in the bedroom and bathroom of their home. It was based on this information, obtained after a search of the house, that the police immediately realized that Amanda was no longer alive. The pictures that were obtained from Sam's phone played a crucial role in his conviction. In November 2022, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison. What happened to Amanda is truly horrific. Equally horrific is that the crime was committed while Amanda's son and daughter were in the house. Today, we will look into the events that took place in Williamsport, Pennsylvania in 1999. Imagine, a quiet evening, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But on that night, Miriam Ill's life was suddenly cut short. Today, we will dive into a case that still sparks much controversy. You will hear not just a crime story, you'll face a puzzle where every detail contradicted another. A locked house, no signs of forced entry. A dark secret with many suspects, no witnesses, several DNA samples, and an alibi for the main suspect. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. You'll learn how an old photograph could turn the entire investigation upside down. It all started on January 17, 1999, when a man called 911 and reported that a woman had been found in a house. He was a friend of the victim and had gone to check on her because she hadn't been answering her phone calls. When he arrived at her house, he found that it was locked. None of the doors would open. He looked through the window and saw his friend, Miriam Illis, lying on the kitchen floor. It was clear that she was dead. When the police arrived at the scene and entered the house to inspect the body, they saw that Miriam had been shot in the back, in the heart area. Investigators interviewed the man who called 911, and he provided them with enough information about the victim. Miriam was a homemaker, formerly a medical worker. She was involved in the local community. That day, her friends were worried because she didn't show up for Sunday school class. She was a good person and a very dedicated mother to a young boy. Many people knew her, and everyone who did thought she had no enemies. Yet, the woman who had no enemies was found on the floor of her own kitchen, and all the doors in the house were locked. What had happened to Miriam was a mystery that investigators needed to solve. They had to determine the time of death. Since there were no witnesses, the exact time of death remained unclear. The police officers examined the crime scene in search of evidence. The house was undisturbed, and there were no signs of forced entry. All the external doors leading to the house and garage were locked. When the body was discovered, a telephone receiver was lying near Miriam's hand. This indicated that she was likely on the phone with someone when she was shot in the back. It's possible she didn't even see the attacker, and everything that happened was a complete surprise to her. Investigators requested a report from the phone company to learn about Miriam's recent phone calls. While thoroughly inspecting the crime scene and trying to understand how the perpetrator entered and left the house, the detectives noticed something important. They saw a bullet hole in the window. It was an exterior double-glazed window located right above the kitchen sink. It was clear that the person who shot Miriam was outside the house. She likely had been standing, leaning against the kitchen sink, talking on the phone when the fatal shot rang out. This single shot now became the only lead. When investigators traced the trajectory of the shot, it led them to a creek bed behind Miriam's house. Then, as they continued their search, the forensics team was able to find foot impressions. They were left by size 14 Reebok basketball shoes. The tracks were positioned in such a way that it was clear someone had taken a shooting position next to a tree right behind Miriam's kitchen window. The detectives also found a cigarette butt at the location from where the shot was fired. During further searches, they discovered what turned out to be a homemade silencer. It was becoming obvious to investigators that the crime had been planned in advance. The perpetrator had been hiding behind the tree, waiting for the right moment. He paced back and forth, smoked a cigarette, and knew exactly what he was doing. But who did this, and why? Someone had taken serious steps and put a lot of effort into planning and carrying out this crime. It didn't seem like Miriam was involved in any illegal activities or taking any risky actions that would put her in danger. Investigators were looking to gather more information from Dr. Richard Illes, who showed up when the investigators were at the crime scene. Dr. Richard Illes was a cardiothoracic surgeon at Williamsport Hospital. He was well known and had saved many lives. In the early 90s, Illes met Miriam Zambi while working as a resident at St. Louis Medical Center. Miriam was a surgical assistant. Within a few years after they married, they had a son, Richie, and moved to Williamsport, where the Illes worked side by side together. Miriam was active in her community as well, volunteering at the symphony and at church. She was a dynamic, exuberant personality who made friends wherever she went. Despite the money and the status, Miriam's friends say she was very down to earth. They were one of the wealthiest people in Williamsport, if not the wealthiest. Miriam decided to become a stay-at-home mom when Richie was 2. She quit her job and never looked back. When a woman is murdered in her own home, the first person to focus on is her husband. Dr. Illes told investigators that the last time he saw Miriam was when he visited her home 2 days earlier on Friday, around 5 p.m. He was planning to visit his family, who lived in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Then the detectives learned that the couple had recently separated after 8 years of marriage. Miriam had moved out of their family home into the house where she was found dead. Miriam had primary custody of their son, Richie, and Richard Illes visited him every weekend. The fact that they were going through a divorce became a potential motive. Investigators had to carefully examine their relationship. Dr. Illes's behavior immediately struck the detectives as odd because the first thing he asked when he was told that Miriam was dead was what evidence had been found. At that moment, it seemed like a rather strange question for someone who had just learned that the woman he had been married to for 8 years, the woman with whom he shared a child, was now dead. Then, Richard Illes made an interesting confession. He told the detectives that he was no stranger to handling firearms. He had been involved in hunting and owned firearms, which was common for many people in the area. There was nothing particularly unusual about that. Investigators wanted to take a look at Richard's weapons and see if any were linked to the crime scene. They were able to determine that the bullet that killed Miriam was a .22 caliber, which gave the police an idea of what type of weapon they should be looking for. Dr. Illes owned several .22 caliber rifles, which the police seized for examination. Richard became the main suspect in the case as he had a motive, access to weapons, and the necessary skills to carry out the crime. Love can easily turn into hate, and that hate could have been the reason for Miriam's death. While the firearms seized from Richard Illes were being analyzed in the forensics lab, investigators dug deeper into his life. As a cardiothoracic surgeon, he earned a good salary. He was paying a substantial amount for child support, around $12,000 a month. Money could have been another reason why Richard might have wanted his wife dead. Investigators demanded details from Dr. Illes about his whereabouts when Miriam was shot. Richard was supposed to pick up Richie for the weekend on Friday evening. He decided to spend the weekend with his sister, who lived 2.5 hours away in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania. He could confirm the beginning of his trip with the help of a witness, Nancy Mitch. Nancy Mitch was able to explain to investigators that she was with Miriam during the exchange when Miriam handed over her son Richie to Dr. Richard Illes for the weekend. Richard picked up Richie around 5 p.m. Nancy left, and Miriam seemed to be fine. So the last time they could confirm that Miriam was alive was around 6 p.m. on Friday, January 15th. Now the police knew that Richard had picked up his son from Miriam's house and left. Miriam stayed home, and everything seemed fine with her. Richard told investigators that he made a brief stop before heading to his sister's. First, they stopped at his house. Around 9:30 p.m., he headed towards southeastern Pennsylvania with his son. According to him, they reached Lewisburg and stopped at a fast food restaurant. He indicated that the stop was around 10 p.m. The weather was bad that evening, and he called his sister around 11:24 p.m. to let her know he was going to stop and that he and Richie would spend the night near Harrisburg. Nancy confirmed one part of Richard's alibi. Now, detectives needed to verify if the rest of the information he provided was accurate. They checked Richard's cell phone records and confirmed that he did indeed contact his sister. He also had a receipt from a hotel in the Harrisburg area where he checked in at 12:57 a.m. Richard's story was verified, and it seemed like he couldn't have been at the crime scene when someone shot Miriam. A check of Richard's rifles showed that none of them matched the murder weapon. The silencer found at the crime scene didn't fit any of Richard's rifles either. Additionally, DNA samples found on the silencer and the cigarette butt didn't match Dr. Richard Illis's DNA. As the investigation continued, the police learned that Richard had been having an affair. He had developed a romantic relationship with Catherine Sawyer, a colleague at Williamsport Hospital, which had led to his separation from Miriam. The circumstances under which he met Miriam were very similar. He had started working with her, they formed a relationship, and they got married. Then, the same thing happened with Kathy. She worked with Richard, and they eventually started an affair. This information allowed investigators to propose another theory, a love triangle. Catherine could have had a motive to kill Miriam. She might have wanted to remove Miriam from her path to eliminate the possibility that Dr. Illis would reconcile with his wife. Jealousy is often the driving force behind terrible actions, but there was more at stake than just their relationship. In a divorce, Richard and Miriam would have to divide property and split a lot of money. In addition, Richie would probably stay with his mother, and Richard would have to pay child support. Miriam's death was beneficial to both Dr. Richard Illis and his new lover, Catherine. Detectives needed to figure out where Catherine was when Miriam was killed. If Richard had left town to visit his family, it would have given Catherine the opportunity to commit the crime. However, investigators discovered that when the crime occurred, Catherine wasn't in town. She was visiting relatives in another state. She couldn't have committed the crime. The problem was that the police had no other suspects. There were only Richard and Catherine, but both of them had alibis. Then, an unexpected turn in the investigation occurred. The perp contacted detectives on his own. Letters were sent to the police station. The first anonymous letter claimed that the letter writer was responsible for the murder of Miriam Illis. The detectives were baffled. They had never encountered anything like this before. At first, they assumed that someone thought it would be funny to send such a letter to the police. Perhaps some teenagers were amusing themselves. Maybe someone had seen the case in the news and sent the letters to the police but had no connection to the case. The person who wrote the letter claimed to be a soldier of God, a soldier of death. He claimed that the victim was a bad person, that she was immoral. It didn't make any sense, and it was just strange. Although the criminal tried to make contact, he also went to great lengths to conceal his identity. The letters were checked for fingerprints. There were none. They were written by hand, in block letters, with a pencil. It was done in such a way that the police couldn't compare the handwriting and determine how this person usually wrote. While the investigators were puzzled over the letter and its contents, another letter arrived. The second letter was written in a different style, and the author clearly displayed arrogance and intellectual superiority. The second letter led investigators to a new suspect. The author described himself as someone with academic degrees, many of them. This suggested that the crime might have been committed by one of Richard Illis's colleagues. The most likely person, according to investigators, was Dr. Zama. He was a very good friend of Miriam's. He and Richard were partners. Since Richard Illis headed the cardiology department, this could have caused friction between him and Dr. Zama. Dr. Zama turned out to be a tall man, likely with fairly large feet, possibly size 14. He was certainly someone the investigators needed to focus on regarding the anonymous letters. Dr. Zama was called in for questioning, and investigators showed him both letters. Dr. Zama believed someone was trying to frame him. He claimed to have no connection to Miriam's death and insisted he never wrote the letters. According to him, he got along with Miriam, and they were friends. He also stated that he had been with friends during the time of the crime. Investigators checked Dr. Zama's alibi, and it was confirmed. He could not have been the one who shot Miriam. The anonymous letters were also tested for DNA. A black hair was found on the sealed flap of the envelope. The DNA was tested and did not match Dr. Zama's, but it also didn't match any other DNA samples collected from the crime scene. Investigators now began to think that someone was trying to mislead them, trying to send them down a false path. The person who wrote the letters went to great lengths to conceal his identity, but did he accidentally send his hair to the police? The investigators believed that the letter writer had deliberately put the hair in the envelope because it belonged to someone else unrelated to the case. The police now suspected that they had been planted with false evidence. The silencer with DNA, the cigarette butt with DNA, the letters with DNA, all indicated that someone was trying to confuse them. In the end, investigators had 4 DNA samples, and they all belonged to different people. It turned out that the perpetrator was very cunning and thought that the false evidence would prevent the police from solving the case. Then, investigators received the information they had been waiting for since the first day of the investigation. When Miriam's body was found, there was a phone receiver near her. Investigators obtained phone records and learned that she had been talking on the phone with a friend all evening. Officers met with this woman, and she explained that during her and Miriam's phone conversation, she heard the sound of breaking glass. She heard Miriam say, "Oh my God." After that, she heard nothing and hung up. She called back and got a busy signal. She simply assumed the call had been dropped and that Miriam was talking to someone else. This new information provided detectives with what they had been missing from the very start of the investigation. The call ended at 10:37 p.m. It was the exact time of death. The time of death was crucial. Knowing the exact time of death, detectives began to recheck the alibis of all potential suspects. Dr. Richard Ellis's alibi was now less convincing. At first, he said he was in the Williamsport area, and by 10 p.m., he was already heading south on Highway 15. He claimed that he and his son stopped to eat at a restaurant. If he had indeed been at the restaurant around 10 p.m., he couldn't have committed the crime, but detectives couldn't confirm he was there at 10 p.m. Because of this, his alibi was no longer convincing. Investigators refocused on Richard. He drove south on Highway 15, and at 11:24 p.m., he called his sister and told her that he and Richie would have to stay at a hotel. That call became very important. Detectives began to find out where Richard's cell phone was when he called his sister. The new information changed the course of the investigation. The cell phone company provided coverage maps, and the police were able to pinpoint roughly where Richard's phone call had been made. It turned out that Richard had enough time to commit the crime and then get to the hotel where he checked in at 12:57 a.m. Detectives conducted an experiment, driving the same route from the victim's home to the hotel, and confirmed that Dr. Illis could have committed the crime at 10:37 p.m. and still made it to Harrisburg in time to check into the hotel at 12:57 a.m. The distance from the crime scene to the hotel was about 100 miles. Even though the weather had been bad, the investigators made the trip within the time frame. Dr. Richard Illis was now the only suspect without an alibi. But the lack of an alibi didn't make him a criminal. The police needed evidence that would directly link him to the crime. They were fortunate. It was a big break, no doubt. 2 men were walking in the woods and stumbled upon a modified rifle. They thought it looked strange, so they picked it up and called the police. The rifle had a shortened barrel, a stock, and an optical sight. The bolt had been removed and discarded. All markings on the rifle had been filed off to conceal its serial numbers. They determined it was a .22 caliber rifle, which matched the bullet that killed Miriam. The rifle was found near the road Richard Illis was driving on the night of the murder. Using the suppressor found at the crime scene, experts tried to determine if this rifle was the murder weapon. There was a screw on the barrel that had been added so the suppressor could be mounted on it. The suppressor fit perfectly with this rifle. Now the question was how to connect the weapon to Dr. Richard Ellis. It was a Savage 23D Hornet rifle. Police learned that Dr. Ellis had inherited his father's weapons, and his Aunt Jeanne was the only person who knew about it. A detective met with Richard's aunt and began asking her questions. She pulled out a photo album and flipped through it, showing the detective old pictures. On one black and white photo, she showed him her brother, posing with a Savage 23D rifle. There were too many coincidences pointing to Richard as the perpetrator. He had inherited the rifle from his father, along with other firearms. However, his gun safe contained many weapons, but the Savage rifle was not among them. The investigators still needed more evidence to secure a conviction. There were several DNA samples in the case that did not match Richard Ellis's DNA. When the snow melted, investigators returned to the forest where the rifle had been found and conducted a thorough search. They discovered a pair of athletic shoes. It was determined that the shoes were the same size as the footprints at the crime scene. They also had the same tread pattern, meaning the prints had been left by the same shoes. Such a coincidence, with sneakers and a rifle found in the woods matching those used in the crime, was highly improbable. Experts needed to prove that the shoes belonged to Richard Ellis. The sneakers were size 14, while Richard wore size 10. It was possible he had purposely worn shoes that were not his size to mislead the police. The shoes were sent to the lab for forensic analysis. A hair was found on the tongue of one of the sneakers. DNA testing showed that it did not match Dr. Ellis's. This was another setback for the investigators, but they refused to give up. If they were right, Richard Ellis was not the only person at the crime scene that night. They theorized that Richard had given his son Richie sleeping pills to make him fall asleep in the car. Another hair test was conducted, this time searching for a match to Richie's DNA, not Richard's. They found a match based on mitochondria. Richard Ellis had planned to use false DNA to mislead the police, but in the end, his son's DNA connected him to the murder. Investigators believed that Richie's hair had ended up in the sneaker by accident, possibly transferred from another surface when Richard had changed his shoes. In December 2002, 3 years after Miriam's death, Richard was arrested, which came as a surprise to him. He was very smart. He made a plan. He created an alibi. He made a silencer. He wore the wrong shoe size. He left DNA on the silencer. He left DNA on the cigarette butt. He sent the police the hair in an envelope, but all the DNA samples belonged to other people. He got rid of the rifle by destroying all the serial numbers. It looks like he was in a hurry to get to the hotel to provide an alibi, so he didn't hide the rifle and boots more carefully or somewhere else where they couldn't be found. Richard Ellis had carefully prepared for this crime. He had to modify the rifle and make a suppressor. All of this took time. He didn't want his son to witness the horrible scene, so he planned the crime for the weekend when Richie stayed with him. The plan was put into action on Friday at 5 o'clock in the evening when he picked up his son from Miriam's. Richard returned a few hours later and parked the car about half a mile from Miriam's house. He gave his son a sleeping pill to sleep in the car. Richard then walked along the creek bed and positioned himself by a tree. He waited until Miriam was near the kitchen window. He couldn't shoot from any other position, so he waited for hours until Miriam was in the right place. At 10:37 p.m., she was there, talking on the phone with a friend. That was when he took the shot. He left evidence at the crime scene, a cigarette butt in a place where it could be found. Then he left the scene, leaving size 14 shoe prints, returned to the car, and drove south. He went to a secluded spot to dispose of the evidence. He discarded his rifle and sneakers, then returned to the road and continued on his trail. He then called his sister at 11:24 p.m., knowing that the phone records would help him create an alibi. However, the records actually showed that he had enough time to commit the crime. Richard Ellis did not confess to the crime. However, the jury believed otherwise and found him guilty. In 2004, He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The victim's family issued a statement saying, "This was a tragic thing here, and we don't feel there are any winners, but we are glad to finally get to this point, to have a resolution and justice." Richard Ills attempted to appeal the court's decision, but he was unsuccessful. Like most teens in a new relationship, I thought I was in love. I would wake up to "good morning beautiful" texts, get treated to my favorite meals, and would cheer on my boyfriend at his sporting events. My family welcomed him in, and his did the same for me. Things were going great, until they weren't. A few months into our relationship, I started noticing changes. Was the honeymoon phase over? I noticed more anger in my boyfriend. It started as small things that would send him into a rage, such as me not texting him back right away or not answering my phone. At the time, I validated his actions, telling myself he is just having a bad day. Occasionally, he would call me names, but again, I defended him and would tell my friends, "We all say things when we're angry. I know he doesn't mean it." When we were with my friends or family, he didn't show much interest in being there. He would sit quietly on his phone, hardly interacting with everyone. It bothered me, but I thought maybe he was just tired, or maybe he was just wishing it was just us two, so we could cuddle up and watch Netflix. I wished he would want to spend time with my friends and family, but I always tried to brush it off. Sometimes I would get upset at the way he acted, and I would try to tell him that, but he never seemed to understand. He would tell me I was being dramatic and that I needed to get over it. This went on for months and never seemed to get better. Actually, things were getting worse. I remember the first time he got so angry that he threatened to hit me. I was so scared, but thought I was okay because he wouldn't actually do that, right? This wasn't the first or last time he expressed his anger like this. My friends tried to tell me this wasn't normal. They told me he was no good for me and to move on, but I just didn't want to hurt him. I had my heart broken in the past. I'm sure we all have at some time or another, and I never wanted to break someone else's heart. So, I did what I thought any teen would do. I tried to work it out with him. Things would be better for a period of time. We would be happy again, laughing, enjoying each other's company, and just having fun. But then, something would happen that would make him angry again. Eventually, the empty threats weren't so empty. I had been shoved, I had been punched, I had even been bit. I couldn't understand why he would do that to someone he loved, and I knew it was time to end things. The tragic events we will explore in this video took place in 2020 in Abington, Pennsylvania. Morgan McCaffrey was only 18 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. When Morgan was a child, her mom, Kathleen McCaffrey, adopted Morgan from Guatemala and sought to provide her with a better life. Morgan was extremely close with her family. She had many friends who considered her a best friend. Morgan graduated from Nazareth Academy High School and was starting classes in dentistry at Manor College. Morgan was very excited about her future, but most of all, she was excited to share it with her boyfriend, Gilbert Newton III. They had been dating for about a year when Morgan was accepted into college. Unfortunately, Morgan never got the chance to share her college memories with Gilbert because something terrible soon happened. By the time the alarm bells started going off, Morgan was already deeply in love with Gilbert. She woke up every morning with sweet, good morning messages that were accompanied by compliments on her beauty. When they spent time together, Gilbert tried his best to show Morgan how much he loved her. Morgan was wholeheartedly devoted to Gilbert and was willing to do whatever it took to make him happy. After the first few months of dating, Gilbert's true colors began to show. What started out as a beautiful love story quickly turned into something much darker. Gilbert still tried his best to organize a great evening for Morgan, but now his efforts were accompanied by scathing remarks and even insults. It all started with Gilbert getting angry if Morgan didn't immediately respond to his text messages. The fairy tale of love turned into the reality that is described at the beginning of this video. Morgan made the decision to end her relationship with Gilbert. The problem was that after the relationship ended, the threats and insults didn't stop. In fact, it got much worse. Gilbert was the kind of guy who can't take no for an answer. He couldn't accept the fact that Morgan had started a new life in which Gilbert had no place. He begged Morgan for something, anything, some kind of reconciliation so they could move on. He asked Morgan if she would agree to meet him in a public place where they could talk things over, settle their differences, and finally put an end to the story. Morgan, after hesitating, agreed, and they decided to meet to talk things over. But Morgan had no idea how the meeting would end. It was July 27, 2020. Morgan and Gilbert decided to meet at the Meadowbrook train station. This meeting took place about a month after Morgan ended her relationship with him. Before going to the meeting, Gilbert took 2 knives from the kitchen of his mother's house. The events that unfolded at the train station quickly made the news. I had my heart broken in the past. I'm sure we all have at some time or another, and I never wanted to break someone else's heart. So, I did what I thought any teen would do. I tried to work it out with him. Things would be better for a period of time. We would be happy again, laughing, enjoying each other's company, and just having fun. But then something would happen that would make him angry again. Eventually, the empty threats weren't so empty. I had been shoved, I had been punched, I had even been bit. I couldn't understand why he would do that to someone he loved, and I knew it was time to end things. After ending the relationship, the threats didn't stop. I received messages threatening to kill me and to keep my head on a swivel. I agreed to meet him to give him closure. I was scared, but I never thought he would actually kill me. Until he did. I was blinded from seeing the red flags. The emotional abuse, the threats, the physical abuse, it was all there. But I didn't see it until it was too late. According to investigators, Morgan and Gilbert talked at the train station for about 45 minutes. During that time, Morgan was looking for an opportunity to leave. This is evidenced by the fact that her car engine was running throughout their conversation. She probably thought that this would be a short conversation, their last meeting, after which Gilbert would realize that they could not be together. After she told him she was seeing someone else, he insulted her, prompting her to slap and spit on him according to his testimony. He then started stabbing her with the knife, he said, but did not recall what happened after that. A random passerby witnessed the attack and immediately called 911. Unfortunately, by the time police and paramedics arrived on the scene, Morgan could not be saved. Gilbert had stabbed her more than 40 times. According to an eyewitness, immediately after Gilbert committed the crime, he got into his Jeep and fled the scene. About 2 hours later, Gilbert Newton's mother called the police to report that her son had confessed to her to attacking Morgan. Gilbert insisted that it was not his intention to hurt Morgan. He was simply blinded by a rage that he simply couldn't control. When the police arrived, Gilbert was in the house waiting to be arrested. He did not deny that he was responsible for what happened to Morgan. During the trial, much new information came to light about Morgan and Gilbert's relationship. Assistant District Attorney Kathleen McLaughlin told jurors that a day before the stabbing, Newton saw a social media post of Morgan with another man. That's when he set out his plan to kill her. If he couldn't have her, nobody could, she said. He told jurors he went to meet up with Morgan about 7:30 a.m. that day to talk about their relationship. and she was supposed to give him some of his things back. Newton said they met at a church parking lot, but relocated to the train lot because Morgan had seen a creepy guy nearby. Newton testified he grabbed 2 knives from his kitchen before meeting up with her because he was going to stab himself in front of her to see if she would stop him to prove if she still cared about him. He had also recently seen on social media that she had a new boyfriend. Newton said he met her and got into her car to talk. Inside the car, he asked her if it was true that she was with someone else. Newton testified he thought he and Morgan McCaffrey were meant to be. He told jurors that she told him she was with someone else, prompting him to insult her. Newton said she slapped him and spit on him. "Instantly, I just started stabbing," he said. He told jurors that he does not recall much after that. The next thing he remembered was that he drove to a friend's house, but did not go inside the home. Newton testified he did not intend to kill Morgan McCaffrey. County Detective William Mitchell showed jurors a series of text messages that Newton had with Morgan McCaffrey, as well as his relatives and friends. The messages dated back to about a month before the homicide, which was around the time Newton and Morgan McCaffrey had split up. In a series of text messages over several days in that roughly month-long period, he repeatedly tried to get back together with her, and would often send insulting messages to her when it didn't appear to be working, according to testimony. He would also text her about how upset he was about the split. "I just want to stab you in the neck continuously," one of the texts to Morgan read. When questioned about the text messages by Assistant District Attorney Kathleen McLaughlin, Newton admitted to sending horrible messages, but couldn't remember all of the things he said to Morgan McCaffrey. He also said he was upset that Morgan had blocked his cell phone number and his social media accounts from contacting her. Mitchell also showed jurors text messages sent from Newton to his friends and family shortly after Morgan's death. His family urged him to come home, which he eventually did. "I killed Morgan about an hour ago," he texted his mother, according to testimony. "You had no influence over my actions," one of the texts to his mother read. "I'm really sick in the head." Newton had his head down during a large portion of Mitchell's testimony. At no time did he claim that he did not commit the crime. He only insisted that the crime was not premeditated. Charles Peruto, Newton's attorney, had urged jurors to find Newton guilty of third-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. First-degree murder means that the killing was premeditated and carries a life sentence in prison. "No one's going home after this trial," Peruto said. "We're just going to determine whether or not someday he gets out." Peruto told jurors that Newton was distraught during the incident. He noted that there were multiple friends and family that testified that Newton had an excellent reputation prior to the incident. "He's acting under emotion, under the strain of his own mental problems," the defense attorney said. Newton had testified that he was upset after the two had split up. Assistant District Attorney Kathleen McLaughlin took issue with that, saying that Newton was trying to look like a victim in the case. "It's all a manipulation. It's all about him," she told jurors in her closing argument. "It's never about Morgan and what he did to her." McLaughlin showed jurors a series of text messages Newton had sent to Morgan and his mother, threatening violence to Morgan in the roughly month-long period between their breakup and her killing. In one of the texts, he threatens to stab Morgan 57 times. Newton had testified at the trial that he sent those messages, adding that he sometimes says bizarre things that don't make sense when he's upset. "He's a kid, he's an idiot kid, an immature kid," Peruto told jurors, "but a good kid with good character." Counting to 45, representing the number of fatal stab and slash wounds suffered by Morgan McCaffrey, the young woman's mother dramatically confronted convicted killer Gilbert Newton III in court. "You're a monster, Gilbert Newton. You took my daughter from me. How dare you?" Kathleen McCaffrey shouted directly at Newton as she ended the count during gut-wrenching testimony after Newton was convicted of first-degree murder. "You didn't just stab her, you slaughtered her. You don't know the hell I go through every day." Seated at the defense table, Newton stared blankly and showed no outward emotion as the grieving mother addressed him in the Montgomery County courtroom. "The pain of missing her is indescribable," said Kathleen McCaffrey as she forced Newton to look at a photograph of Morgan taken several days before the murder. "This isn't just a life sentence for you, Gil. This is a life sentence that you imposed on all of us." Kathleen McCaffrey said she adopted Morgan from Guatemala and strived to give her a better life. "You have no idea what you've done to me. You're not a caring person because if you were, you would not have done this to Morgan," Kathleen McCaffrey added. "You're a murdering monster. I hate you. I will always hate you, and I will never speak your name again." The jury deliberated for about 2 hours before finding Newton Gilbert III guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced in September 2021 to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the year since Morgan's death, her family and friends have created Morgan's Light, a nonprofit working to raise awareness about toxic teen relationships. After ending the relationship, the threats didn't stop. "I received messages threatening to kill me and to keep my head on a swivel. I agreed to meet him to give him closure. I was scared, but I never thought he would actually kill me, until he did. I was blinded from seeing the red flags. The emotional abuse, the threats, the physical abuse, it was all there, but I didn't see it until it was too late." Now my story is helping other teens, young adults, and parents to recognize the signs of unhealthy toxic relationships. It is encouraging those in relationships to reflect inward on their relationship and evaluate if it is healthy or if there are some concerns. My story is shining a light on a topic that isn't widely talked about, but yet is so prevalent in our community. With your help, we can put an end to teen dating violence, domestic violence, and the silence surrounding them. If my story touched you in any way, I'm asking you to please share this with your friends and family. No one should have to feel confused, unsafe, alone, or scared in their relationship. If you or someone you know is in an unhealthy relationship, there are resources out there to help. Kelly Bullwinkle, a Crafton Hills College student from Redlands, California, went missing in September 2003. Kelly was last seen leaving a local restaurant where she worked as a part-time waitress. Initially, the authorities suspected that her disappearance was related to prohibited substances, but this story turned out to be much more intricate. The subsequent investigation led the detectives to the truth, which many could not believe. Kelly was the only child of Diana Bullwinkle. Kelly loved her small town, but like most teens, she was starting to outgrow it and planned to move away and study psychology and creative writing at Sonoma State in Northern California. Ever since Diana Bullwinkle separated from Kelly's father when Kelly was 3, she and her daughter were very close. The two hopped around to different cities, following Diana's orders with the U.S. Coast Guard, with whom she had made Chief Petty Officer and Health Services Technician. Diana didn't get to see her daughter on prom night, though. She was on her first shipboard detail with the Coast Guard in Central America. However, leaving Kelly alone wasn't a big deal. Kelly was generally considered conscientious by friends, teachers, and employers. Besides, her mother's friend, Laura Williams, whom Kelly considered one of her parents, lived with them in their 3-bedroom Spanish-style home on La Feliz, a quaint street about 5 miles from downtown. For her senior prom, the most exciting night of her life, Kelly Bullwinkle, just 17 at the time, decided on a knee-length red dress to complement her shoulder-length red hair. Kelly's date was an older girl, her 19-year-old best friend, Kinsey Nordman. Even in socially conservative Redlands, girls can go with girls to the prom, and when they started kissing each other on the dance floor, that too was all in fun. Their appearance together at the prom could have easily been the start of something positive. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. Mother and daughter's last words were by email on the Saturday morning before Kelly went to work. Later that night, Diana emailed Kelly and did so again the following morning, but there was no response from Kelly. Kelly Bullwinkle finished her shift as a cashier at Baker's Burgers at 4:20 p.m. on Saturday, September 13th. She wasn't scheduled that day, but took the shift when one of her coworkers got sick. It was typical of Kelly to help a friend in need, and she didn't complain about having to work. In fact, Kelly covered half the cost of her recently purchased 1992 Mazda Protege with money she saved up from working at the burger joint. After work, she drove off to hang out with friends. When she didn't show up for her shifts the next 2 days, her employer called and left messages on her answering machine, wondering why the usually responsible teen hadn't shown up to work. On September 15th, Laura Williams, a friend of Diana Bullwinkle who lived with them, returned from a 5-day trip to her parents and heard phone messages left by Kelly's employers. But that wasn't the only strange thing. Kelly's 9-year-old Australian Shepherd, Blaze, 4 cats, and her goldfish, Jessie, hadn't been fed. Her diabetic dog had not received its twice-daily insulin shots. The porch lights were still on, and the newspapers were still lying at the bottom of the stairs. Kelly loved her animals dearly and couldn't forget about them, so Laura Williams immediately had a bad feeling. On the same day, September 15th, she went to the police station and reported Kelly missing. Laura told the officer that Kelly was hanging out with new friends and had been using prohibited substances lately. She thought Kelly had thrown a party sometime over the weekend because she found empty liquor bottles scattered around the kitchen. Laura Williams emailed Kelly's mother, who was working on a ship off the coast of Costa Rica at the time, and informed her that Kelly had disappeared. The police immediately began gathering information and looking for Kelly. First of all, the police wanted to know who was the last person to see her or talk to her. The police found a clue among the messages on the answering machine at Kelly's house. One of the most recent messages left on it was from her friend Kinsey Nordman, in which the latter asks Kelly to hang out with her. Therefore, investigators decided to talk to her. On September 17, 2003, Sheriff Deputy Gary Coopersmith went to Kelly's home to investigate the missing person report. Kinsey was there at the time. She already knew her best friend had disappeared and wanted to help the police. Kinsey told the officer that she and Kelly had used prohibited substances and advised them to contact Kelly's father, who lived in Texas. According to Kinsey, Kelly's father sold them substances, and the three of them used them together. When asked when she last saw Kelly, Kinsey replied that they met on the eve of Bullwinkle's disappearance. They spent the evening together, and then Kelly went home. That was the last time Kinsey saw her. Forensics searched Kelly's house, hoping to find clues that could help with the investigation. Kelly's belongings, including her clothes, shoes, and jewelry, remained in her room. There was a mess in the room. However, there weren't any signs of a struggle. It was more like the room of a teenager who hadn't cleaned up for a while. Mrs. Bullwinkle returned home the following Friday, September 19th, as soon as she was able to get off the ship. Kelly's mother pleaded on TV to whoever took her daughter, saying, "Please send her home. Don't hurt her. She's a great kid." Diana assured the detectives that Kelly could not have disappeared of her own free will because she simply had no reason to do so. When she had plans to go somewhere, she always warned about it and asked someone to look after her pets. The first important lead the police had was Kelly's car, found in the parking lot of Ontario Mills Mall, about 25 miles from her home. On September 14th, one day before Laura Williams reported Kelly missing to the police, Ontario Mills Mall security called a tow truck because of an abandoned car. It was taken to the impound lot. As it turned out, it was a Mazda belonging to Kelly. Investigators considered this a bad sign. After all, criminals often abandon their victims' cars in such places so that it would be harder to find them. Criminologists examined the car, found hair on the seat upholstery and some fingerprints, and sent the potential evidence to the laboratory for analysis. Kelly's purse and other personal belongings were in the car. There was a mess inside the car, but at the same time, there were no evident signs of a crime. One of the main questions the investigators wanted to find an answer to was who left Kelly's car near the mall. Evidence found in the car led the police to Kinsey Nordman, Kelly's best friend. But could Kinsey have had anything to do with Kelly's disappearance? When Kelly went missing, Nordman played the role of a loyal friend to the girl with whom she had been inseparable since Kelly's senior year. Nordman passed out missing persons flyers. Police and friends said she also joined in on the two-day search, which involved over 100 members of the U.S. Coast Guard and focused around the area where Kelly's car was found at the Ontario Mills Mall on September 14th. Nordman even spent time at Kelly's mother's house, lending her support, especially in the first week after Kelly disappeared. However, examining Kelly's social media, investigators found something suspicious. A week before her disappearance, Kelly posted about a crisis in her relationship with friends on LiveJournal. She appeared ready to move on and make new relationships. Kelly wrote, "Now it is time for me to move on from those things and those terrible people that I somehow was friends with and go find my real friends, the ones that I didn't listen to when they tried to steer me in the right direction." The investigators met with Kinsey again. She denied any involvement in her friend's disappearance, saying she was Kelly's best friend and was often in her car, so it was not surprising that her fingerprints were found there. It made sense to the investigators. Besides, they had no evidence to link Kinsey to Kelly's disappearance. Before leaving the police station, Kinsey told investigators they needed to question other friends of Kelly. According to her, Kelly knew a group of people from the criminal world. She even mentioned two names, Mike McMillan and Eric McLaughlin. The police knew these people. At that moment, they were under arrest for car theft that occurred on the same days when Kelly disappeared. The investigators first questioned McMillan. He said he knew Kelly because his cousin worked with her. McMillan was surprised when he was informed that Kelly had disappeared and stated that he had nothing to do with it. The police had no evidence to link him to Kelly's disappearance. Eric McLaughlin also denied his involvement in this case. There was no evidence against him either. Redlands Police Department focused on McLaughlin and McMillan and searched their apartments and crash pads. Inside a safe house the two used, police found a bloodied white t-shirt and jeans. A portion of the carpet with blood splatter was also taken as evidence. In both homes, there were scattered clippings of Bullwinkle's disappearance. The evidence was sent to the laboratory for examination. At this investigation stage, the police believed they were on the right track and that the evidence they found would help solve this case. However, in the end, their hopes did not come true. While Mike McMillan and Eric McLaughlin pleaded guilty to other crimes they committed, they were not connected to the disappearance of Kelly Bullwinkle. On October 4th, 3 weeks after Kelly disappeared, two Redlands residents playing paintball along San Timoteo Creek, about a half-mile from the intersection of San Timoteo Canyon and Alessandro Roads, discovered Bullwinkle's remains down a 28-foot embankment buried under an orange weathered couch. The two men drove the 2 miles to the Redlands police station to report their grisly findings. Bullwinkle was partially buried in a shallow grave and was still wearing the clothes she went to work in, a juxtaposed blue tank top, a Chico camouflage-colored jacket, and a pair of Levi's blue jeans. Also discovered at the scene were an O-ring, a broken cell phone, writings, a green canvas bag, a shovel handle, cassette tapes, rubber and leather gloves, and a bullet casing from a .25 caliber pistol. A few days later, the San Bernardino County coroner ruled that the teen died from a gunshot wound to the head. The first shot was non-fatal and was 1 inch long by 1 inch wide and grazed the top left side of her head. The second was fatal, entering the right rear side of her head. Kinsey Nordman told police that Kelly would not have gone back there unless she was with people she knew or if prohibited substances were involved. She would have done anything for them. She would have walked back there if she had to, said Kinsey. The investigators did not see any apparent motives for this crime. They hoped that the shell casing discovered next to Kelly's body would allow them to find the one who took her life. While awaiting the results of the ballistics examination, the police decided to again focus their attention on Kelly's social platforms and her relationships with friends, namely Kinsey Nordman and Damian Guerrero. The latter initially seemed to be a mutual friend of Kinsey and Kelly, but by delving into these relationships, the investigators learned something important. Guerrero lived in a two-story white and tan home in Highland, an upper-class suburb next to Redlands, with his mother, stepfather, and brother. He was smart and admired by his peers among the town's small goth crowd. He topped off his black t-shirts and black pants with white contact lenses like his idol Marilyn Manson. Nordman and Guerrero liked to listen to Manson, 9 Inch Nails, or Tool, and watch films like Reservoir Dogs, A Clockwork Orange, or their favorite Natural Born Killers. Bullwinkle may have longed to be Guerrero's soulmate, but Guerrero and Nordman had a deep connection, and they really did consider themselves to be soulmates. For Christmas 2002, Nordman bought Guerrero the matching snake rings Juliette Lewis's character gave Woody Harrelson's character in Natural Born Killers. Nordman was so taken by the movie that she had a poster in her room and even named her parrot and rabbit Mickey and Mallory, the names of the Harrelson and Lewis characters. Kelly Bullwinkle, Kinsey Nordman, and Damian Guerrero became friends in high school. Damian was in a relationship with a girl named Elodie Romero. However, by examining the emails, investigators learned that Damian was also intimate with Kelly. Kinsey and Damian were best friends even before they met Kelly. At first, the relationship between the three was good. However, everything changed after Kelly and Damian's intimate relationship stopped being a secret. Kinsey Nordman and Elodie Romero, Damian's girlfriend, whom he did not want to break up with, found out about this. A strain between Bullwinkle and Nordman was revealed in an email Bullwinkle sent to Nordman 3 days before the killing. "You treat me as if you're the work of God's hands," Bullwinkle wrote. "You always rub it in my face that you have a boyfriend, and I don't." The more investigators studied Kinsey Nordman, the more they became convinced that she was not the sweet girl she appeared to be when they asked her questions. Her parents also knew about her dark side. Kinsey's mother, Deborah, once overheard a phone conversation between her daughter and her then-boyfriend Marco Diaz, who later went to prison for assaulting another woman. According to police transcripts, Deborah recalled Diaz saying, "Wouldn't it be cool if your mom got cancer and we could take away her medication so she could die?" Kinsey agreed, adding it would be cool. Diaz then asked, "Wouldn't it be cool if your dad died?" Nordman agreed again. The family was devastated. Kelly Bullwinkle's relationship with Damian and Kinsey showed signs of cracking at the prom. Elodie Romero, Damian's girlfriend, called Kelly a poser and criticized her for wearing the same shoes and shopping at the same goth clothing store as her. The situation worsened in August, when Elodie Romero found out about Kelly's relationship with Damian, whom she had been dating for 2 years. The information was laid out in an instant message in which Kelly told Elodie about her intimate relationship with Damian. Shortly after, Damian broke things off with Kelly Bullwinkle, but Kelly seemed to be in love with him, and this became a problem. According to Patrice Engel, the mother of one of Romero's close friends, Elodie and Damian were frustrated with Kelly because Kelly wouldn't leave Damian alone, that she was obsessed with him, and he wouldn't reciprocate. Elodie and Damian were tired of Kelly hanging around and interfering with what they were doing. Nordman and Bullwinkle were fighting more often too. More than 400 family members and friends, including Nordman and Guerrero, attended Bullwinkle's memorial service at Memorial Chapel at the University of Redlands. They looked overwhelmed with grief, or at least wanted to give the impression that they were mourning Kelly. Investigators started suspecting that one of Kelly's friends might be involved in what happened to her. They called Kinsey Nordman in for questioning. During a long interrogation, she eventually confessed that she and Damian Guerrero had taken Kelly's life, but she claimed it was an accident. "We really screwed up," she said. "Damian and I shot Kelly. It was an accident." When police questioned Guerrero, he admitted to owning a .25 caliber pistol that he said he dumped months earlier in a storm drain near Center Street and Cypress Avenue. After scouring the storm drain, police could not find the gun. However, they found several shell casings in Guerrero's backyard, and ballistics confirmed that they matched the shell casing found next to Kelly Bullwinkle's body. In custody, Nordman told the police that what happened on September 13th was a terrible accident, a practical joke gone awry. The plot was hatched 2 weeks earlier. Bullwinkle was to pick up Nordman after her shift at Baker's Burgers. The two would drive to San Mateo Canyon, hike a little bit, and wait for Guerrero's arrival. When Guerrero arrived, the two would lure the terrified Bullwinkle over to a shallow grave they had dug the day before. They would point a gun at her head and tell her that this was the way she was going to die. However, Guerrero was 2 hours late and almost missed the two as they were driving out of the canyon at 7 p.m. Guerrero persuaded the two to stay and go for yet another walk, this time in the direction of the 1-foot-deep grave. While Bullwinkle was standing near the shallow grave with her back to her two friends, the gun went off. Nordman said she was shocked because she didn't think Guerrero would bring a gun. Guerrero said the gun went off accidentally. Kinsey stated it was supposed to be a joke. Kelly was supposed to freak out, and that was supposed to be it, according to police reports. Kelly fell to the ground. She moved her legs and moaned. Kinsey claimed she panicked and told Damien to shoot Kelly a second time, but he said he couldn't do it. Then Kinsey took the gun and shot Kelly in the head so that the latter wouldn't suffer anymore. After that, Kelly stopped moving. Nordman's mother, Deborah, who was present during Nordman's confession, asked her why she didn't use a cell phone to call for help. Nordman replied that there was poor reception in the canyon. Guerrero placed Bullwinkle into the shallow grave, while Nordman scooped dirt on her with her hands and feet. They smoothed the top of the grave with Nordman's father's shovel the two had left at the scene the day earlier. A nearby tattered orange couch was dragged over her body, excluding her right leg, which was still exposed when the paintballers found her 3 weeks later. Nordman drove her dead best friend's car to the Ontario Mills Mall and abandoned it in the parking lot. Guerrero, in his 2001 Honda Civic, followed behind. They both changed their clothes, threw Kelly's car keys in a dumpster, and went to dinner. They even had time to take in a 9:20 p.m. movie, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, at the Krikorian Theaters. Police didn't buy Nordman's tale of a joke gone awry. At a press conference on November 6th, they stopped short of providing a motive and would only say that the murder was over a personal dispute between the three. During the trial, Nordman and Guerrero continued saying that Kelly's death was an accident. However, the fact that it was Kinsey who fired the second and fatal shot instead of trying to call 911 left the jury in no doubt about her guilt. The court sentenced Nordman to life in prison. "I know in my heart that there is no excuse for what I did," Nordman, 21, said in a 3-page statement she read to a San Bernardino County Superior Court judge and a packed courtroom. "I know in my heart of hearts that I never meant for Kelly to be hurt, and I would give anything to bring her back." Judge Michael A. Smith, who called this one of the most tragic and senseless cases of his 18 years on the bench, delivered a sentence that won't allow Nordman a parole hearing for nearly 44 years. As for Guerrero, the jury could not reach a unanimous decision. Therefore, there was a retrial. He pleaded guilty to second-degree life deprivation and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 15 years. Diana Bullwinkle, U.S. Coast Guard Chief Petty Officer, originally of Las Cruces, passed away on February 1, 2014, in Redlands, California. She served her country for 26 years, receiving an honorable discharge from the U.S. Coast Guard. Guerrero applied for parole 3 times, in 2018, 2019, and 2021, but was denied release. However, his 4th attempt was successful, and he was released from prison in July 2023. It remains unclear what really happened that day and what was the motive for taking Kelly Bullwinkle's life. Authorities found no evidence that Guerrero's girlfriend, Elodie Romero, was involved in the crime. Share your opinion on this case in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end. Today, we'll discuss the events that occurred in North Carolina in 2011. Investigation is a complex and multifaceted process that requires high professionalism, experience, and the ability to think outside the box. During this process, investigators face various challenges, such as lack of information, opposition from suspects or witnesses, and the need to work with limited time and resources. When 27-year-old Laura Ackerson stopped contacting family and friends, it immediately became clear to the authorities that they were dealing with foul play. During the investigation, the police realized this was the most horrific case they had ever encountered. They had to travel across the country and cover more than 1,200 miles to learn the truth. This case could have remained unsolved, but fortunately, the surveillance cameras helped to establish the cause of Laura's mysterious disappearance. Laura Jean Ackerson was born on April 30, 1984, to Roger and Brenda Ackerson in Hastings, Michigan, the only city in rural Barry County in the southwest corner of the state. There were 6 other children in the family, including her father's son, Jason, who was 3 years older than Laura. When Laura was a toddler, Roger and Brenda separated. The battle of unsubstantiated allegations and contentious finger-pointing that led to the divorce inflicted emotional scars on everyone, fracturing family relationships and leaving the children with conflicting loyalties. In 1996, Laura and her mother, Brenda, moved to Iowa. Laura graduated from Linville Sully High School. She moved to Kinston, North Carolina, where she worked as a businesswoman in graphic design. In 2011, 27-year-old Laura was the mother of 2 sons, one of whom was 3 years old and the other 2. The children's father was a singer and songwriter named Grant Hayes. Although I usually don't do this in other videos, we need to delve more deeply into the relationship between Grant and Laura to understand this story. It will provide answers to any questions you may have as we move on. Grant was born to Patsy and Grant Hayes Jr. on April 30, 1979. According to his mother, Grant was a sweet child. He was very docile. In high school, she said, her son was so charming that all the girls liked him. Being able to play guitar added to his popularity. And even while still a teenager, he was good enough to perform on the Raleigh nightclub scene. When he was 18, he married a ballerina named Emily Lubbers and moved down to Greenville, North Carolina. Grant said that she and her dancing were the inspiration for many of the songs he wrote. The relationship dissolved rather quickly. As it disintegrated, Grant fell into a deep funk and sought psychiatric treatment. He was prescribed medications for depression and bipolar disorder, including lithium. Then he moved back to Raleigh. According to a close friend, the religious instruction Grant had received growing up remained apparent in his life. He regularly attended church, made prayer an essential part of every day, and studied the Bible faithfully until 2003. But then, the friend said, Grant turned his religious fervor over to Tupac Shakur's music, learning all the lyrics of Tupac's songs just as he once learned Bible verses. Grant began to spend most of his time talking to others by relating tales from the life of Tupac. Soon after, he started drinking alcohol and using various types of illegal substances. During this period, Grant continued to work hard. One night in late 2006, as he performed at a venue, a 22-year-old woman, Laura Ackerson, caught his eye. Right after that, Grant and Laura started dating. Laura was taken by the fact that she and Grant shared a birthday. It made their coming together seem like fate. It was on their next birthday, April 30, 2007, that they exchanged vows before a justice of the peace. Laura turned 23 that day, Grant 28. But being with a musician is not so easy. Constant traveling, rehearsals, concerts. Grant was often away from home. It was difficult for him to balance work and family life, and the appearance of children tests the couple's strength even more. And not every family manages to pass this test. Eventually, Laura and Grant's relationship began to deteriorate. Quarrels became an integral part of their lives, and each such quarrel grew into a serious conflict. Laura and Grant often could not find common ground and did not hear or understand each other. They seemed to be speaking different languages. It was too easy for him to dominate and manipulate the young, naive woman. He attempted to establish control over all her activities and associations. In addition, Grant began to behave strangely. Among his most outrageous requests was that he asked Laura to talk to his fans about their intimate lives. When she objected and was horrified at that prospect, he said he didn't understand why she had a problem with it. Laura experienced other incidents that caused her to be fearful for her safety. From time to time, Grant slipped into what he described as his blackouts or lost time. Amid those disengagements from reality, he acted odd and violent, and then he would fall suddenly into a restless sleep for many hours, twitching throughout as if he were engaged in an unceasing nightmare. He attempted to indoctrinate her in some of his peculiar beliefs. He told her he believed he was a time traveler, and that beings from other planets followed him around and often talked to him. He thought that those same beings ran the United States. Not only did he believe a government collapse was imminent, but he also said, the world will end on December 31st, 2012, and he needed to get enough cash to make it on one of those alien ships at the end of the planet. He believed that very rich, famous, necessary individuals would either be in an underground system of tunnels or on ships, while Armageddon raged across the earth. It sounded as if he had read a piece of Scientology literature and appropriated bits and pieces for his own personal religious doctrine. While pregnant with their first child, Laura discovered that Grant was romantically involved with a woman named Kristen. Grant didn't hide it. The grin on Grant's face while he talked to Kristen on the phone with Laura in the same room made it seem as if he was delighted to keep Laura's insecurity at the highest level possible. Knowing she could hear him, he asked Kristen to marry and run off with him. When Grant hung up the phone, Laura confronted him. Life with Grant became simply unbearable for Laura. On the day she decided to leave him, she felt unwell and sought medical help. That's how Laura found out she was pregnant for the second time. Thus, she decided to give their relationship another chance. Their second son was born 2 months premature on St. Thomas on August 3, 2009. Grant decided to name him Gentle. Now that Laura was the mother of 2, she wanted more financial stability and grew frustrated that Grant was hanging on to an empty dream. She still believed in Grant's talent, but he wasn't making headway toward turning it into a reliable source of income. She wanted him to return to reality and accept financial and emotional responsibility for their 2 children. But Grant was not going to change. He continued to drink alcohol and to use illegal substances, and was in relationships with other women. One of these women was Amanda Perry. Amanda Perry Tucker was born 7 years before Grant Hayes, on April 8, 1972. In 1989, Amanda gave birth to a daughter, Shaw, but the relationship with the father of her child did not last long. In 1998, Amanda got married for the second time. But the marriage was short-lived. In October 2000, her husband died from injuries sustained in a fall from a significant height. After getting her film and television degree, Amanda knew she had to go to Los Angeles. That's where the work that she wanted to do was centered. She scored some small parts out there. Among her credits were television shows like The Stepford Wives, The Sopranos, Dexter, Twins. Amanda was out on a date when she first saw Grant Hayes performing at the Parrot Club. She didn't see him again for another 6 months. Then one night she saw Grant Hayes again. They talked, and he gave her one of his CDs. Amanda felt their connection was instant and electric. As a ploy to get to know him better, Amanda asked him to teach her how to play the guitar, and Grant agreed. She told Shaw about the lessons and described her teacher as a performer who sounded like Darius Rucker, the lead singer and rhythm guitarist for the Grammy Award-winning group Hootie and the Blowfish. Grant and Amanda were married in Vegas on April 10, 2010. Yet, at this very time, Laura considered herself Grant's wife. Laura was stunned when Grant sent her a photograph of his Las Vegas wedding, along with a message that he and Laura had never really been married because he hadn't signed the paperwork. She rummaged around in her papers and finally found their certificate of marriage. Laura stared dumbfounded at the piece of paper. He never signed the marriage certificate. Without his signature, the document was not legally binding. She never had been Grant's wife. She had 2 sons with him, but no tie that binds. But that wasn't the only terrible surprise Grant had in store for Laura. Grant and Amanda settled in Raleigh, and Laura lived in Kinston, about 80 miles away. Grant decided to get custody of their 2 sons and went to court. And you probably think that no judge would grant custody of children to a man like Hayes. But don't jump to conclusions. Grant had filed an ex parte motion telling Judge Les Turner that Laura was an unfit mother. An ex parte decision is one decided by a judge without requiring all of the parties to the dispute to be present. Grant alleged that Laura purchased a Craigslist ad looking for someone to live with her at no cost. Grant's lawyer suggested that Laura was ready to trade intimacy for housing. Grant also claimed that Laura used his checking account to pay for a subscription to a website called Sugar Daddies. Without any opportunity to appear, object, or fight for her boys, the court accepted him at his word at the time, awarding Grant full temporary emergency custody of the children. On June 15, 2010, Laura was served the emergency ex parte custody motion. 2 days later, with paperwork in hand, Laura met with attorney John Sargent. When Laura finally got her day in court for a return hearing on June 25th, Judge Beth Heath had to decide whether to keep the emergency order in effect or to put some other arrangement in place. Laura did not look very stable to the judge. She had no permanent place to live and didn't have a job. Offsetting that was Laura's allegation that Grant was a substance abuser. The attorneys met with the judge in chambers and reached an agreement. The children would remain with Grant during the week, but would be with Laura on the weekends. They would make the exchange at a public place in Wilson, about halfway between their two residences. The judge also ordered a full psychological review of Grant, Laura, and the boys because of the dueling charges about the issue of character and behavior. Additionally, Grant would be the one responsible for covering the upfront cost of the evaluation. A handwritten consent agreement put everything in place. Provisions were made for phone communication, allowing for reasonable contact when the boys were with the other party, no more than twice a day, and 15 minutes or less in duration between the hours of 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. Other conditions were that neither party would get a passport for the children or remove them from the state of North Carolina while the order was in effect. The meeting place established for the exchange of the children was the Sheetz gas station and convenience store near the intersection of Interstate 95 and US 264 in Wilson, about halfway between Raleigh and Kinston. Laura filled her weekends with the boys with trips to the playground and nature parks. They did arts and crafts projects together. One night of each visit was pizza night. Together, they'd build little pizzas and pop them in the oven. Grant had a lot of complaints about the new court order arrangement. In a Facebook message to his friend Crystal Wiggins, he wrote, "I'm very happy, stressed from the whole custody arrangement and what it is doing to my boys. Their mom is a woman scorned and, well, making life for me as difficult as possible. My wife is going to New York to clean out our place and put it on the market." When Crystal responded with regret that things did not work out with his wife, Grant fired back, "My wife? I was never married to my kid's mother. My wife now is awesome." He continued grousing that the custody arrangement made it impossible for him to leave the state, and his rent in New York had been paid up front for a year. In addition to disputes with Grant, Laura now had conflicts with his wife, Amanda Hayes, and the latter's daughter, Shaw. At one point, Laura's sons told her they had spent the whole day with Shaw. She later called the girl and said, "Stop raising my children. They have a mother and father, and it's not your job to raise them." Amanda was furious at Laura. She told her, "Never call my daughter again." The conflict between Laura and Amanda didn't end there. When Laura was concerned that Gentle might have croup, she sent Grant an email containing information she had found online. Laura was careful to couch her words with an abundant use of if and if necessary. Nonetheless, the message prompted a strong reaction in Amanda, who called Laura and said, "You are psycho crazy. You don't have anything better to do with your time than research crap on the internet." She went on to tell Laura that the kids didn't have a virus, they had a cold. She accused Laura of always bringing the kids back home ill because she took them to the water park and let them stay wet all day long. When Amanda hung up on Laura, the latter called her back and told her what she did was inappropriate. "You are still new to the situation." Amanda shot back, "I am responsible for your kids now because you are psycho crazy." Laura was shaken by Amanda's call. She was certain that Grant had painted her as insane and had convinced Amanda that she needed to help him protect the kids from their mother. For slightly over a year, Laura had the children on weekends, and Grant had them during the week. That decision was on foot of a consent order made at the Lenoir County District Court on June 29, 2010. It was a temporary arrangement, and both Laura and Grant had to undergo psychological evaluation by Dr. Ginger Calloway, a forensic psychologist. In August, Grant, using Amanda's money, finally made the first down payment of $5,000 to Dr. Ginger Calloway. On Grant's side, there were questions about Laura's psychological state. He stated that she was either mentally unstable or mentally ill. He also claimed that she had a negative impact on the children and was attempting to alienate them from their father. From Laura's attorney, Calloway received questions about Grant's credibility and manipulative behavior. Concerns were also raised about the numerous threats he'd made about taking the children from their mother. The next step, on August 26th, was a meeting with both Grant and Laura together to determine their issues and evaluate their interactions with one another. In that session, Grant said that he and Amanda wanted full custody and stated that Laura should have supervised visitation only. Laura, on the other hand, said that she thought both parents needed to be involved with the children in an established parenting access plan. Grant said, "I think Laura will go away as soon as she sees there is no payday. This is all an act." During that initial appointment, Calloway noted that Laura was quick to criticize Grant with barbed or sharp comments. It was a long process that dragged on for almost 1 year. During this time, Grant and Amanda had a child together. However, in the end, Dr. Calloway evaluated them and issued a report recommending that Grant and Laura share legal and physical custody of the children. Laura had just received the results of that report, and she was confident that the court would at least split custody of the boys. About Grant, Calloway wrote, "His rambling and tangential thinking included excessive negative commenting about Laura, and noted that his anger toward her and his inappropriate characterizations of her make him appear to have a determined agenda. Laura wanted to have the boys with her as much as she could. She had worked hard to try to get them back and started 2 new graphic design businesses so that she could support them. It seemed that Laura's life was gradually improving, and she had reasons to be optimistic, but everything changed when she mysteriously disappeared." On July 13, 2011, Laura was supposed to meet her friend and business partner, Siobhan Mathis, at a restaurant. Mathis waited for her for over an hour, but Laura never showed up. She tried to contact Laura by phone, but the latter didn't respond to any calls or messages. The following morning, Siobhan repeatedly called Laura. She was well aware that such behavior was not typical of her friend. On the evening of July 14th, Siobhan sent Laura an email. She wrote that she was worried about not being able to contact her. 3 days later, Siobhan drove to the building where Laura's apartment was located and saw that her car was gone. It made Siobhan worry even more. On Monday morning, July 18, 2011, Siobhan came to the Kinston Police Department and reported that her friend and business partner, Laura Ackerson, had not been in touch for several days. Police stations often receive reports of people disappearing, and in most cases, they find the missing individuals either on the same day or within the next few days. But Laura's case was different. By the time Siobhan went to the police, Laura had not been in touch for almost a week. Besides, the children had been with Grant all this time, and Laura was supposed to pick them up 3 days ago. After receiving information about the missing young woman, the investigators immediately went to her apartment. They saw nothing suspicious in Laura's apartment, no signs of a struggle or rush to leave. It was obvious that no one had been there for a long time. The plants in her room began to dry out. They had not been watered for several days. The apartment complex where Laura lived had an access control system. Only people with a key could enter the building. Inside the complex, there was a surveillance camera, and the investigators decided to make sure that Laura Ackerson left the apartment of her own free will. They knew the approximate time when Laura was supposed to leave the apartment to meet Siobhan. The CCTV footage showed Laura leaving the apartment complex. Laura had a phone in her hand. She looked calm and relaxed. She was alone, without large bags or a suitcase. It indicated that she was not going on a long trip. Judging by the recording, it was a very ordinary day for Laura. After talking to Siobhan, the detectives knew that Laura and Grant met every Friday, and she took the children to her place on weekends. So the detectives called Grant to find out if he and Laura had met last Friday. Grant said he was supposed to meet Laura at a gas station in Wilson, but she never showed up. According to Grant, he called Laura several times, texted her, and left voice messages, but she did not respond. The detectives knew there was a custody battle between Grant and Laura over their 2 sons, so they decided to check his words and went to that gas station in Wilson. Fortunately, they still had the CCTV footage from the day Grant said he and Laura were supposed to meet. The detectives reviewed the recordings, starting with those made on Friday, July 15th. They saw that Grant and his kids had indeed arrived at the gas station and spent some time there. There was nothing strange about his behavior. He bought something for him and his sons to eat and waited for Laura to show up. But Laura never showed up. So Grant and his sons got into the car and drove away. Now, the detectives knew when exactly Laura Ackerson could have disappeared. It was the time interval between when she left her apartment on Wednesday morning, July 13th, and when she did not arrive for a meeting on Friday, July 15th. Information about Laura's disappearance was made public in the press. The police hoped this would help find witnesses and speed up the search. And that's exactly what happened. On the same day, Oksana Samarsky, Laura's friend, contacted the police. She told the investigators that on July 13th, at about 4 p.m., she received a voice message from Laura. The latter said she was going to go to Raleigh to pick up the kids. But if we look at the calendar, we will see that July 13th is Wednesday, and Laura could only pick up the children on Fridays. It was strange, so the investigators wanted to find an explanation for it. Given this information, it was obvious that Laura most likely disappeared between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. on July 13th, when she did not show up for a meeting with Siobhan. If she was going to see her children, did she show up at Grant's house? If so, why didn't Grant say anything about it in his conversation with the investigators? Laura's disappearance was reported to the police on Monday, July 18th. The next day, the patrolman found her car parked outside an apartment complex in Raleigh. They examined the car but found nothing suspicious, either inside or in the trunk. However, the investigators were more interested in the location where the car was parked. The vehicle was about half a mile from the complex where Grant and Amanda lived. They contacted Grant by phone and asked him to come to the police station, saying they had a few questions. But the man refused, citing that he was out of town. The detectives had a feeling that Grant was either hiding something or was involved in Laura's disappearance. And these suspicions were further strengthened when the investigators suddenly had another witness. Laura's best friend came to the police station. She spoke in detail about the custody trial, the date of the last court session, during which it was to be decided who the children would stay with, was approaching. She also described Laura and Grant's relationship, starting when they first met. The new information further convinced the investigators that the last place Laura was before she disappeared was Amanda and Grant's apartment. It was time to visit them. To do this, the detectives obtained a search warrant. The second the police officers opened the front door to the apartment, they felt a strong smell of cleaning products. And there was a big stain on the carpet right at the doorstep. Obviously, something was either spilled on the carpet or someone tried to clean it. The characteristic smell of cleaning products was also felt in the bathroom. The bathtub itself shone with dazzling cleanliness. It seemed suspicious. Something had obviously happened in that apartment. The investigators didn't know what it was yet, but already had a hunch about it. However, that's not all that caught their attention. They found the note with 2 handwritten paragraphs, each in a different handwriting. In the note, Grant offered to pay Laura $25,000 to give up custody of their children. Below that was Laura Ackerson's signature. And there was also a date, July 13th, 2011. As you may remember, this is the day when Laura got in touch for the last time. A further search of the apartment led the detectives to something even stranger. There was an instruction manual for a reciprocating saw. They immediately started looking for places where people could buy such saws in Raleigh. they discovered they were available at Walmart, which is approximately 3 miles from Grant and Amanda's apartment. The investigators went to the location and discovered that the last time such a saw was bought was on the night of July 14th. CCTV footage helped identify the buyer. Just after 2 a.m. on Thursday, July 14, 2011, Grant Hayes entered the Briar Creek Walmart, grabbed an empty cart, and made his way to the hardware department. He studied the aisle with power saws and blades for a bit before going off to look for assistance. He asked the assistant manager, Susan Dufour, "What's the longest blade that will fit in a jigsaw?" Susan went back to the aisle with him and showed it to him. "What about those longer ones?" he asked, pointing to a blade hanging farther down the row. "No," she said, "that won't fit a jigsaw. It's for a reciprocating saw." She explained that on a reciprocating saw, the blade goes in and out to cut objects like drywall and used longer, sturdier blades for that purpose. But a jigsaw worked on a flat surface to cut, so its blades are shorter and thinner. Grant asked about the reciprocating saws, but then balked at the price. Susan left him to his decision and went back to her work. Eventually, Grant dropped a box with a reciprocating saw and a couple of blades into his cart. He approached Susan again and asked where he could find large industrial trash bags. She escorted him to that spot, and then he wanted plastic tarps. She pointed him to the aisle. After picking those up, Grant returned to Susan, inquiring about goggles. After picking out a pair, he headed to the front counter and checked out. The investigators also found out why Laura decided to pick up the children on Wednesday and not on Friday, and why she came to Raleigh and not to Wilson, where she usually met Grant. It turned out that Grant had lured her to his apartment. On July 13th, the day Laura disappeared, at 4:08 p.m., Grant sent Laura a text message saying, "Would you like to keep the boys for the week until Sunday the 24th? At 4:12 p.m., she replied, "Okay, I'm leaving Wilson now. I'll call when I get past the traffic. Where will you be in an hour or so?" It was becoming evident that Laura was no longer alive and that Grant was responsible for this. Moreover, the police discovered that Grant was trying to create an alibi for himself. At 4:08 a.m. on Friday, July 15th, Grant sent an email to Laura exactly like the message he texted to her on Wednesday. "Would you like to keep the boys for a week until Sunday the 24th? At 3:30 that afternoon, the usual established time for them to exchange the boys for the weekend, Grant strapped little Grant and Gentle into car seats in his Durango and made the drive down to the Sheets in Wilson. He knew that place had surveillance cameras installed, so he went in and out of the store several times to confirm the legend that Laura did not show up for the meeting. Before arriving at the gas station in Wilson, Grant visited Walmart for the second time, where he paid cash for 3 black and 3 red duffel bags. Minutes before 2 p.m., Grant sent a message to Laura's email complaining about not being able to reach her on her cell. "This is not cool," he wrote. Grant shopped at Walmart again on Saturday morning, July 16, 2011. At 6:56 a.m., he bought a 120-quart cooler and 3 bags of ice. After loading them into the Durango, Grant went back inside and returned 3 of the 6 duffel bags he'd purchased the day before. Then he bought a 75-quart cooler and made a stop at the in-store McDonald's. At 10:59 a.m., Grant walked into a U-Haul facility in Raleigh. He did not look the least bit worried, hurried, or alarmed. Under the name Grant Hayes, he rented a trailer for $159. He also bought boxes, a sofa cover, a lock, and a ball mount and ball for his Durango to enable him to haul the trailer for an additional charge of $102. That night, pulling the rental behind his car, he made a trip to the Target a mile from his apartment. At 8:10 p.m., he purchased 2 Igloo Max Cold wheeled coolers, one 75 quarts, the other 50 quarts. He put them into the trailer and returned to the store, where he bought a toilet brush and paper towels. That Saturday night at midnight, Amanda, Grant, and the 3 children set out for Texas, a journey of 1,200 miles, an arduous undertaking with 3 little kids on board. About 8 hours later, the Durango pulled into a Motel 6 in Montgomery, Alabama, not quite halfway through their cross-country journey. Amanda paid $44 in cash for a room and registered as Amanda Smith. She and Grant slept for a few hours before heading west to Texas. The investigators learned that Amanda Hayes had a sister. Her name was Karen Berry, and she lived in Richmond, Texas. When the officers knocked on Karen's door, she was already waiting for them. Amanda and Grant were no longer there. Karen said that she had a conversation with her sister, from which she learned that Grant and Amanda had done something terrible to Laura. Amanda said, "Laura is dead." Karen looked at her little sister's face, seeking answers but afraid to find them. Amanda asked, "Is there any property that has a big hole in it?" Grant and Amanda kept asking a bewildered Karen about deep places, and finally she said, "There's a septic tank in the back." But as Karen and Amanda headed that way, suspicion smacked up against Karen's denial. "I don't think this is a good idea. One day this house might belong to one of my kids." "It's not a good idea at all," she said, and headed back to the house. Grant told Karen he needed some acid and asked if there was a Home Depot nearby. Karen gave him directions and let Amanda borrow a vehicle to drive there. At 9:37 a.m., Amanda Hayes walked to a drive-up ATM in a strip shopping center and made a withdrawal. A little after 10, in that same shopping center, Grant entered the Home Depot wearing a dark shirt and pants. Grant purchased the gloves, a 32-gallon plastic trash can, and the muriatic acid for a total of $69. Amanda and Grant were planning to get rid of the remains with the help of that acid, but they didn't succeed. So Amanda poured the acid out by stopping her pickup truck at the side of the road. They needed a new plan. Amanda asked her sister for permission to take the boat tied up at the edge of Oyster Creek. She also asked Karen if there were any alligators there. A special team of divers from Houston searched for Laura in Oyster Creek. A few days later, they found several separate body fragments. Soon after, the examination confirmed that the remains found belonged to Laura Ackerson. Grant and Amanda Hayes were the only suspects. They returned to North Carolina. On July 25th, they were arrested and charged with multiple counts. The trial began in 2013. The prosecutor stated that Amanda and Grant were experiencing financial difficulties and wanted full custody of Grant and Laura's sons. Therefore, they decided to get rid of their problems by luring Laura into their apartment. What they did to Laura after taking her life is no less terrible. Rosemary Godwin, an attorney on Amanda's defense, filed several motions. In one, she requested that her client sit at a separate table during the trial, since Grant Hayes had written her a threatening letter. Grant's lawyer, Will Durham, insisted that the crime was unpremeditated and that it was Amanda who took Laura's life. "This case is about a man covering up his wife's actions," he said. On July 13th, Amanda Hayes killed Laura Ackerson during the fight. It wasn't something that was planned, it was something that happened. On July 13th, Durham said, Laura Ackerson goes to Grant's house as she's done many times before. And she gets there and they are talking about the custody case and talking about how much money they spend on it. And somehow, a joke about how much money has been spent becomes an agreement. "And you'll see that agreement," he said, referring to the piece of paper found in the Hayes' apartment. They agreed to end the custody dispute. This what Grant had wanted. He wanted custody of his kids, and he was ecstatic. But standing 3 feet away was Amanda Hayes, and her husband had just agreed to give his ex-girlfriend $25,000. And they didn't know exactly where they were to get it from yet, and she was angry about it. Grant went to get the kids ready for the special visit. Something happened, and we don't know exactly what that was. But we do know what Amanda Hayes tells her sister 5 or 6 days later about what happened. Then Amanda did something serious, and Amanda tells her sister that I hurt Laura, I hurt her bad. Now what happens next are the terrible decisions of people who are terrified. Grant and Amanda started making terrible decisions because they were afraid to call the police. They were afraid that no one was going to believe what had happened wasn't intentional. They worried about going to prison. They make terrible decisions, and Amanda took charge of the situation, sent Grant out that night. He went and got some money. He said he went to Walmart hours after Laura's death. He buys a saw, and the next morning, Amanda calls her daughter Shaw and says, "Come get these children. Come get the boys out of the house." and Shaw does it and leaves Amanda and Grant with Laura Ackerson's body and the saw in the house. FBI forensic document examiner Lindsay Dinn had examined the note in which Laura gave up custody of her boys in exchange for $25,000. She determined that the top part was in Grant's handwriting and the bottom part was in Laura's. However, she could not determine who had written Laura's signature. The defense tried to press her on the latter point, but she insisted that she could reach no conclusion about that signature. We'll never know what really happened in Amanda and Grant's apartment. The exact cause of Laura's death was never determined because of what they did with her body. However, Grant's cellmate, who testified at the trial, said Grant confessed to him that he and Amanda lured Laura into the apartment, where they strangled her and then did the rest. On September 16, 2013, Grant Hayes was found guilty of first-degree life deprivation and sentenced to life in prison without parole. On February 18, 2014, Amanda Hayes was found guilty of a second-degree crime. The court sentenced her to 13 to 16 years. 4 years later in Texas, Amanda was sentenced to 20 additional years in prison. Imagine, you dream of the future, you study, work, fall in love. Life seems to be a book where you write the chapters yourself. But what if one day someone's hand crosses out all your hopes? Today, I'm going to tell you a story that shook Australia. A story where promises became a death trap. Her name was Arnima Hyatt, 19 years old, smart, ambitious, full of plans. A girl who wanted to become a doctor to save lives. Her family moved across the ocean to do so, overcoming poverty and cultural barriers. But in 2022, her name was on the front pages of newspapers, not as a heroine, but as a victim. This isn't just a crime chronicle. It is a story about how the dark side of human nature can hide behind the mask of idealism for years, how the quiet voice of fear is drowned out by the loud words of love, and how one act can destroy everything. But be warned, this is not for the faint of heart. There are no black and white truths here. There's pain and betrayal and unanswered questions. There's a man who tried to erase the evidence of his crime, literally. The investigation and the incident itself has been widely covered by the media, and the verdict in this case was handed down about a month and a half ago. Arnima Hyatt was born in 2003 in a small town in southern Bangladesh. Her family, though not wealthy, always put education first. Arnima showed an extraordinary curiosity and work ethic from an early age. She always wanted to know more than other children. She was interested in everything from how stars are lit to how to treat people, recalls her mother, Mahfuza Akhtar. In 2012, the Hyatt family decided to move to Australia. They hoped that their children would have more educational and career opportunities in this country. We wanted our children to grow up in a place where their dreams could become a reality, told Abu Hyatt, Arnima's father. Moving to Sydney was a big challenge for the family. Language barriers, cultural differences, and financial difficulties seemed insurmountable at first. But Arnima adapted quickly. She immersed herself in her studies. Arnima was one of the best students in her school. Her teachers noted her sharp mind and determination. She took an active part in social life and helped organize school events. By the age of 16, she had decided to become a doctor, enrolling in a medical science course at a university in Sydney. According to her mother, Arnima wanted to help people, especially women in difficult situations. But outward success masked personal difficulties. Arnima, like many teenagers, was searching for her place in the world. She dreamed of love and a family, but her traditionalist parents thought she should focus on her studies. They wanted her to finish university first before thinking about marriage. In 2020, Arnima met Miraj Zafar. Miraj was born into a family of Bangladeshi immigrants in Australia. He grew up in Sydney, where his family, like many migrants, sought to build a new life. Before meeting Arnima, he worked as a construction worker and had a passion for sports, which made him physically strong and imposing. He was 2 years older than Arnima. They met through mutual friends on social media, and Miraj quickly gained her trust. He seemed very caring and considerate. He said he wanted to protect Arnima and make Arnima happy. Their relationship developed quickly. Mirage gave her gifts and promised that they would build a happy family. He seemed like the perfect guy. In early 2021, Arnima and Mirage got married secretly. The ceremony took place without their families, which caused a storm of resentment from Arnima's parents. They couldn't believe that she had done it without their consent. They felt that he was not the right man for her. Mirage, however, convinced Arnima that their marriage would be a happy one. He promised that they would move into a separate apartment and start a new life. But just a few weeks after the wedding, things began to change. After entering into a relationship with Mirage, Arnima changed from a cheerful, outgoing young woman who was constantly telling her family how much she loved them to a withdrawn person. Mirage became jealous and aggressive. He forbade Arnima from socializing with her friends, controlled her correspondence, and even threatened to hurt her if she did not comply with his demands. He told her that she belonged only to him. If she looked at someone on the street, he would yell and threaten to hurt her. These were not empty threats. More and more bruises appeared on Arnima's body. He did not develop a respectful relationship with her parents either. In May 2021, Mirage attacked Arnima's father when he tried to interfere in his and Arnima's life. This resulted in a restraining order that prohibited Mirage from approaching the Hyatt family. Arnima, fearing retaliation, did not go to the police about her husband's abuse. She thought he would change. She believed that their love could overcome everything. In December 2021, Arnima found out that she was pregnant. This news was both joyful and terrifying. She realized that the baby would forever bind her to Mirage. She wrote a text message to a friend saying that she did not want a child with Mirage and that she hated Mirage. By the end of 2021, the relationship between Arnima and Mirage had reached a critical point. Mirage, who initially seemed caring and attentive, became increasingly aggressive. He controlled Arnima's every move, forbade her from socializing with friends and family, and threatened to harm her if she tried to break off their relationship. She repeatedly complained to her friends about Mirage using physical force against her. On one occasion, she said, he grabbed her by the neck and squeezed her so that she lost consciousness because he thought he saw her with another man. She told friends she was thinking of going to the police, saying she regretted marrying him and said she wanted a divorce. In January 2022, Arnima's patience ran out and she decided to leave Mirage. This she informed her friend in a text message, which was her last message. On January 31st, 2022, Mirage called his mother. During this conversation, he said that he and Arnima had a serious fight. When his mother asked what had happened to Arnima, Mirage said that she was not breathing. Despite his mother urging him to call an ambulance, he refused, telling her, "I'm not going to call the ambulance, I'm scared. The police will get me and they will put me in jail." He asked his mother if she knew the cost of an overseas ticket. His mother finally called emergency services at 4:32 p.m., with police having to force their way into their home by kicking down the door before making the grisly discovery. Arnima was found lying face down, partially submerged in a brown liquid with 5 20-liter bottles of acid sitting in the bathroom and a strong chemical smell in the air. Her body had to be identified using DNA. She was murdered by the person who was meant to love her, murdered by the person who was meant to respect her, by the person meant to protect her, the person meant to father her child and start a family with, by the person who was supposed to make all her dreams come true. By the time the police arrived, Mirage had fled and was wanted. When the police examined the scene of the crime, they found signs of a struggle in the apartment. Neighbors said that on the night of January 29th, they heard screams from Mirage's apartment, but no one called the police. The scene was very challenging for arriving police. When they did arrive and found chemicals at the unit, they retreated and called other units. Arnima's text messages sent to friends, where she described the beatings, became evidence of her husband's tyranny. As I said, Arnima's body was so damaged by the acid that it could only be identified by DNA. However, experts determined that her death was caused by strangulation. The investigation revealed that 2 days before the discovery of the body, on January 29, 2022, a tragedy played out in the couple's apartment. Mehraj, having learned that Arnima was planning to leave him, strangled her. According to investigators, he either blocked her breathing with his hands or covered her face with a pillow. He placed Arnima's body, who was pregnant at an early stage, in a bathtub. Mehraj's internet searches after killing Arnima Hyatt included, "Can hydraulic acid burn through skin? Bunnings near me. How many years do you get in Sydney for murder? 9 News Live, and Parramatta Police Station." The next morning, Mehraj made desperate attempts to cover his tracks. According to the investigation, he left the North Parramatta apartment in his van and went to the Bunnings store, where he bought 20 liters of hydrochloric acid. He later returned for 4 more canisters, bringing the total amount of acid to 100 liters. Cell phone data gave investigators a lot of frightening information about the couple's relationship. Arnima spoke of Mehraj bashing and beating her almost to death, being a slave, marrying an abusive guy, and asking for a divorce. "Mehraj, when people finds out about us, you're going to jail for years and years," Arnima wrote in December 2021. Mehraj replied, "And who's going to find out?" In another message, Arnima said she did not want a son like Mehraj, to which he replied, "We will have many sons, just like me." Mehraj sent messages to Arnima, including that she did not have his permission to leave the house. On the night of her murder, Arnima messaged a friend saying, "I have nobody except you." The friend replied, "You have got no choice. You have to stay with him." In a final message at 9:10 p.m., Arnima wrote, "No, I hate him." Within 45 minutes, she was dead. The police published Mehraj's picture so that as many people as possible would know that he was a suspect in a crime. Mehraj realized that he would not be able to flee the country. Realizing that his face was already on the wanted list, he decided to turn himself in. He voluntarily presented himself at the police station. His lawyer later stated that his client did the right thing by cooperating with the investigation. However, Mehraj's behavior during his arrest raised questions. He displayed nervousness, refused to comment on the details of the crime, and insisted on his innocence in the early stages. He argued that Arnima provoked the conflict and her death was an accident during an argument. Under pressure from the evidence, correspondence, camera footage, and chemical analysis, Mehraj changed his position. By the time of the trial, the police had enough evidence to prove Mehraj's guilt. All the evidence pointed to him committing the murder of his wife and then attempting to destroy the body to cover up the crime. In May 2024, he formally admitted the murder, claiming that he had acted in a state of temporary insanity for fear of losing his wife. At the hearing in the New South Wales Supreme Court, Mehraj kept a low profile, avoiding eye contact with Arnima's family. His defense was based on 2 arguments. First, the lawyers insisted that Arnima allegedly threatened to leave Mehraj and deny him the right to see his future child, which provoked an outburst of anger. Second, the lawyers argued that Mehraj had not planned the crime in advance and that the purchase of acid was an impulsive decision to cover up signs of panic. In a letter addressed to the court and his victim's family, Mehraj said he took full responsibility for his actions. "I don't know how to begin to say how sorry I am for all that I have caused and all that I have affected through my actions," he wrote in the letter read aloud in court. "It's the most terrible thing to do to someone else. I hope one day you can forgive me. I am very sorry," he said. Prosecutors presented evidence of Mehraj's prior Google searches. "Does hydrochloric acid burn the skin?" and "term for murder in Sydney." This indicated a consciousness of action. Arnima's text messages to her friends, where she described beatings and threats, confirmed that Mehraj controlled and humiliated her. Messages contained in court documents reveal Mehraj's abusive behavior, including Arnima Hyatt begging to be allowed to leave. "I just don't want to say this to your face because I'm scared you're going to bash me again," Arnima wrote in one message. "I don't want a son like you. I can't have your child." Mirage responded, "Baby, you need to let go of the past. Whatever I did was not me at all." Arnima's father, Abu Hayat, stated in his statement during the trial, "You burned the face I kissed every night. You stole our future." "Can you imagine someone burning your child? I can never see her again," he said. Arnima's mother, Mahfuza Akhtar, burst into tears as she described how her daughter dreamed of becoming a doctor. She wanted to save lives, but she couldn't save her own. "I knew he wasn't a good man," she said in a victim impact statement. "We thought she'd figure it out and come home to us. I know now that she did, but it was too late to save her." In a statement read by a support person, Arnima's mother, Mahfuza Akhtar, said her life fell apart the day her daughter was murdered. "There is no joy, no laughter, only suffering and pain. My tears are never ending, and the deep ache in my heart never stops." She said Arnima was stolen, not only from the family, but from the thousands of people she would have helped as a wonderful medical doctor. She recalled the day Arnima got into medical school as the happiest day of my life. "I was so overjoyed, I thought my heart would burst." Ms. Akhtar remembered how beautiful her daughter looked on the day they received their Australian citizenship and said she would give anything to see her face just one more time. "Instead, I sit by her grave every Friday, stroking the grass because I can no longer stroke her hair," she said. In his last statement, Mirage tried to apologize. "I am sorry for what I have done. I hope you will forgive me one day," he said. However, his tone sounded formal, and his words were not backed by emotion. A court-requested psychological evaluation revealed narcissistic and manipulative traits that cast doubt on the sincerity of his remorse. According to prosecutors, Mirage could not accept that Arnima was planning to leave and saw her pregnancy as a shackle rather than a joy. The judge noted that Mirage viewed his wife as property, not as a beloved woman. On December 19, 2024, judgment was entered in this case. Sentencing Mirage in the New South Wales Supreme Court in Sydney, Justice Deborah Sweeney said he had acted with reckless indifference to life by either choking or smothering Hayat. Sweeney said she had considered these factors, along with Mirage's conduct in relation to her body after her death, and that he did not undertake any significant planning or organization in killing Ms. Hayat. The judge assessed the offense as in the mid-range of seriousness for murder and sentenced Mirage to 21.5 years in prison without parole for 16 years. Thus, in 2038, Mirage could be out of prison. "I take into account that he was employed before he committed this offense, and he is accepting of his need for rehabilitation," Judge Deborah Sweeney said. "Given his youth, his limited prior record, and that attitude, it seems he has positive prospects of rehabilitation." The judge emphasized that the sentence reflected the severity of the crime. "You not only took the life of an innocent person, but you tried to erase her existence," she said. Today, Mirage is being held in a maximum security prison in New South Wales. Wardens report that he avoids contact with other prisoners and spends most of his time in his cell. His lawyer periodically appeals, arguing that the sentence is disproportionately harsh, but so far all attempts have been unsuccessful. The story of Arnima and Mirage is not only a chronicle of a crime, but also a reminder of how tyranny in a relationship can lead to irreversible tragedy. Her life, cut short at the age of 19, became a symbol of the struggle for women's rights, and his name became synonymous with an escape from responsibility that never came to fruition. All Arnima's parents have left are memories of their daughter. Every Friday they visit the cemetery where their daughter's name is engraved on a marble slab. The girl who dreamed of saving lives but couldn't save her own. In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in the American state of Georgia. Laken Riley was a medical student at Augusta University College of Nursing in Athens. She was 22 years old, On February 22, 2024, she went for a run from which she never returned. Her death occurred on a trail near the university campus and garnered a great deal of media attention. Investigating the case, detectives used surveillance footage to identify and arrest the perpetrator. Lakin's death caught the attention of not only the media, but also the president. However, Joe Biden, while speaking out about her death, uttered words for which he later had to apologize. Laken Hope Riley was born on January 10, 2002, in Marietta, Georgia. She was the daughter of Jason Riley and Allison Phillips and had 3 siblings. Laken graduated from River Ridge High School in Woodstock, Georgia, in 2020, where she was an active member of the cross-country team. Her involvement in athletics during high school showcased her commitment to fitness and health. After high school, Laken attended the University of Georgia as an undergraduate student before transferring to Augusta University to pursue a degree in nursing. At Augusta University, she continued her academic journey with a focus on healthcare, reflecting her aspiration to become a nurse. Laken was known for her vibrant personality and dedication to her studies. She received her honorary white coat in August 2023, which symbolized the beginning of her nursing career and her commitment to humanism and compassion in healthcare. Friends and family described her as a beloved daughter and sister who had a bright future ahead. Unfortunately, all of her plans and dreams were shattered. On the morning of the day of her own death, at 8:55 a.m., Laken sent her mother Allison a text message that read, "Good morning. About to go for a run if you're free to talk." A doorbell camera captured the moment Laken left the house. She lived with other female students in a rented house near the university. Laken was very fond of running. Morning jogging was an integral part of her daily routine. At 9:24 a.m., Allison read the message and called her daughter, but there was no answer. At that moment, Allison didn't think anything bad could have happened. She assumed that Laken hadn't answered because she was running. 14 minutes later, Allison texted her daughter, "Call me when you can." Allison continued to try to reach Laken, but the calls went unanswered. At 9:58 a.m., Allison sent another text message that read, "You're making me nervous, not answering when you're out running. Are you okay?" Laken's sister and mother continued to make attempts to reach her, but all were unsuccessful. About 2 more hours passed. At 11:47 a.m., Allison texted, "Please call me, I'm worried sick about you." Subsequent calls, including from Laken's stepfather, also went unanswered. It was obvious that something strange was going on. Laken always kept in touch with her family, and her run could not have lasted more than 3 hours. At 12:05 a.m., the police were informed of Laken's disappearance. Half an hour later, her lifeless body was found in a wooded area near the lake near where she had been jogging. By the time police found Laken's body, her mother and sister were already there. The camera captured the moment Allison was given the worst news of her life.
Okay, let's step over here. Come on, let's go. Come on, all right? It's not good. I don't want to tell you yes or no because I don't have names. I don't know who anybody is. I know that this is a pretty serious incident.
An autopsy revealed that Laken Riley died from the combined effects of blunt force head trauma and asphyxia. She sustained serious injuries, including multiple blunt force trauma to the head. The investigation into the disappearance was reclassified as a homicide investigation. To find the person responsible for what happened to Laken, police turned to surveillance cameras. On the morning of the day of her own death, at 8:55 a.m., Laken texted her mother, and a doorbell camera captured the moment she left the house. 10 minutes later, at 9:05 a.m., she was captured by the security camera as she ran with her phone in her left hand in the direction where she was later found. She ran out of the camera's field of view at 9:06 a.m. Data from the smartwatch she was wearing showed that her heart stopped at 9:28 a.m. That is, 22 minutes after the camera captured her, Laken died. However, it turned out that Laken had made a 911 call before she died. The call was made 5 minutes after she ran out of the camera's view. The dispatcher who answered the call did not have time to say anything before the call was cut off. Acting on instructions, the 911 dispatcher called Laken's number back himself twice, but no one answered both times.
Hello, this is Clark County 911. Can anyone hear me?
In the initial stages of the investigation, police combed the area around the trail where Laken was found. They interviewed potential witnesses who may have seen or heard something unusual. Several people saw a suspicious male who was also caught on camera. This footage shows the suspect throwing away his own jacket. The footage was recorded 15 minutes after Laken's death. In addition to witness testimony and surveillance footage, forensic analysis played a crucial role in identifying the perpetrator. Investigators collected DNA samples from the crime scene, including from under Laken's fingernails, which indicated that she fought back desperately. The forensic team also examined items found near her body for trace evidence that could link the suspect to the murder. Police quickly found out the name of the man caught on the tape. It was Jose Ibarra, 26 years old. He was from Venezuela and had entered the United States illegally. On September 8, 2022, Customs and Border Protection officials encountered Ibarra after he crossed the U.S.'s southern border with Mexico near El Paso, Texas. He was paroled and released for further processing, officials said. Ibarra first stayed at a migrant shelter and then began moving around the country. Ibarra had been arrested by the New York Police Department on September 14, 2023, and was charged with acting in a manner to injure a child less than 17 and a motor vehicle license violation. He allegedly had a child on his moped without a helmet. New York officials then released him before a detainer could be issued. From New York City, Jose Ibarra moved to Georgia with his brother Diego Ibarra. A few words should also be said about his brother. According to court documents, Diego Ibarra, 29, has ties to a dangerous Venezuelan gang. Diego Ibarra was arrested for carrying a fake green card that he used to get a job at the University of Georgia. Prosecutors said Diego appeared to have gang ties based on his tattoos, clothing, and use of gang symbols in photos on social media. The gang was described in court docs as being responsible for recent violent confrontations with law enforcement and civilian victims in New York and elsewhere throughout the United States. That allegedly includes a string of violent phone robberies in New York City, where moped-driving members are accused of being those seen dragging victims to the ground to snatch their devices. Ibarra has tattoos linked to the gang, including a 5-point crown on the left side of his neck and a 5-pointed stars on the right side of his neck. Other pictures show him posing with handguns, prosecutors said, a clear violation of the law as he is an undocumented immigrant and is therefore not legally allowed to possess firearms in the U.S. In Georgia, Jose Ibarra lived in an apartment complex about a mile from the wooded area where Laken Riley's body was found. Even before the attack on Laken, he had been arrested for shoplifting at a local Walmart, but was released pending trial. In December 2023, a warrant was issued for his arrest after he failed to appear in court for the theft case. Police could have prevented the Laken attack if Ibarra had been arrested on the outstanding warrant, but no arrest was made. His presence on campus was noted by witnesses who described seeing him in areas frequented by students. In addition, investigators used cell phone data and other digital footprints that established his location near the scene of Laken Riley's death. There was no known connection between Ibarra and Riley, University of Georgia Police Chief Jeff Clark said at a news conference following the murder. This was a crime of opportunity where he saw an individual and bad things happened, Chief Clark said. After gathering enough evidence linking Ibarra to the crime scene, law enforcement arrested him. He had scratches on his hands from the struggle with Laken.
Policia! Hey! Policia, vamos! He said he left them on those. John's gonna try and get it off. Hey, I need you to translate one at a time. Come here. Come to me. Come here. Please read the packet. For you. Tell him I need to see his hands. I need to see his hands. Hey, put the mano para arriba. Tell him to slowly get out. Ask him to get anybody else. Despacito, parte de la cama. Right. Say slowly. También acá, despacito. Ven para acá. ¿Tienes algo en tus botas? ¿Hay alguien más aquí dentro?
Ibarra was charged with 1 count of malice murder, 3 counts of felony murder, and 1 count each of kidnapping, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, hindering an emergency telephone call, tampering with evidence, and peeping Tom. On the day of Riley's killing, Ibarra also peered into the window of an apartment in a university housing building, which is the basis for the peeping Tom charge. Laken Riley's funeral was held March 1, 2024. With her departure came sudden and unwanted fame. Many people who'd heard of her knew too little about her life and too much about her death and its furious aftermath. Those closest to her were understandably reluctant to give interviews. When the world loses someone like Laken, whose light consistently shines so bright, it seems that much darker in their absence, the church's lead pastor, Samir Masad, said in a written statement to the media. Laken was special, he added. She was a gift to anyone who knew her. Smart, kind, compassionate, and thoughtful don't even begin to scratch the surface. She was a loving daughter, sister, and friend. She had a gift for making anyone she was around feel comfortable and seen. In Athens, near the place where Laken made her last run, a wooden sign stood on the shore of Lake Herrick. Someone had used black tape to change the word lake to Laken. Laken Riley's murder and the immigration status of the man charged with it quickly became a rallying cry for some prominent Republicans to blame migrants for crime in America and blast the Biden administration for its handling of the situation at the southern border. Laken Riley's tragic death struck the hearts of Georgians everywhere and has sparked national outrage. Joe Biden's failed policies have turned every state into a border state, and I'm demanding information from him so we can protect our people when the federal government won't, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp said in a post on X at the time. The brutal murderer who took the life of Laken was one of the millions of illegal aliens that the Biden administration simply released and unleashed upon our country. House Speaker Mike Johnson said on X, Donald Trump met with members of Laken Riley's family during his campaign appearance in Georgia. What Joe Biden has done on our border is a crime against humanity and the people of this nation for which he will never be forgiven, Trump charged, alleging that Riley would be alive today if Joe Biden had not willfully and maliciously eviscerated the borders of the United States and set loose thousands and thousands of dangerous criminals into our country. He was an illegal immigrant, and he should not have been in our country, and he never would have gotten into our country if Trump was president, Trump said. In turn, Joe Biden also did not ignore the death of Laken Riley, but he made a mistake in his speech. During the speech, to the loud applause of his supporters, Biden mixed up the name of the victim and instead of Laken said Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal, he added. Note the word illegal in that quote.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals?
Biden does not even know my child's name. It pathetic, Allison Phillips wrote on Facebook. If you were going to say her name, even when forced to do so, at least say the right name, she added. Allison also wrote amen underneath a comment calling 81-year-old Biden a disgrace of a president. Biden later apologized, but not for calling the young woman Lincoln. He apologized for calling Ibarra an illegal. Biden expressed remorse after facing frustration from some in his party for the use of the term to describe people who arrived or are living in the U.S. illegally. I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented, Biden said. Trump, campaigning in Rome, Georgia at the same time, assailed Biden for the comments. Joe Biden went on television and apologized for calling Lakin's murderer an illegal, he said to loud jeers and boos. Biden should be apologizing for apologizing to this killer. He contrasted his rhetoric with Biden's. I say he was an illegal alien. He was an illegal immigrant. He was an illegal migrant. And accused Biden, who has long been seen as an empathetic leader, of having no remorse. He's got no regret. He's got no empathy, no compassion, and worst of all, he has no intention of stopping the deadly invasion that stole precious Lakin's beautiful American life, Trump said. On May 8, 2024, Ibarra was indicted on 10 counts. He pleaded not guilty to all counts. He was denied bail. His trial was set to begin on November 13th with jury selection, but at a pre-trial hearing, he waived his right to a jury trial and requested a bench trial instead. Members of Laken Riley's family spoke in the courtroom. Laken Riley's mother, Allison Phillips, implored Judge Patrick Haggard to show no mercy in sentencing Jose Ibarra. There is no end to the pain, suffering, and loss that we have experienced or will continue to endure, Allison said during family impact statements in court. This sick, twisted, and evil coward showed no regard for Laken or human life, Allison said. We are asking the same be done to him. Allison described her daughter as smart, hardworking, kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, she was a child of God. She said her daughter took mission trips and cared for the elderly in nursing homes. This monster took away our chances to see Laken graduate from nursing school. He took away our ability to meet our future son-in-law. He destroyed our chances of meeting our grandchildren, and he took my best friend, Riley's mother said, sobbing. Lauren Phillips, Laken Riley's younger sister, said she was accepted to the University of Georgia, but wasn't able to celebrate that achievement with her sister. I had to get accepted into my dream school, the University of Georgia, without my sister telling me how proud of me she is and finally getting to live in the same town together again, she said. She described Riley as her sister, best friend, and role model, and said she will miss her infectious laugh, her smile, and her daily good morning messages. The killing also robbed her of her sense of safety. I cannot walk around my own college campus because I am terrified of people like Jose Ibarra, she said. She called Ibarra a monster and said she had no doubt he was responsible for her death. Laken Riley's stepfather, John Phillips, choked up as he read one of Laken Riley's last journal entries addressed to her future husband. To my future husband, I'm working every day to become the best wife I can be, Laken wrote in part. John Phillips said Laken's journal entry is just a glimpse of what was tragically and brutally taken from her and the family. On Friday, November 15th, his trial finally got underway with prosecutors telling the court how the nursing student fought for her life, fought for her dignity against a man who had gone hunting for women that day. Prosecutor Sheila Ross said that when Ibarra he came across Laken Riley, she fought back. When she refused to be a victim, he bashed her skull in with a rock repeatedly. Defense attorney Dustin Kirby said in his opening that Riley's death was a tragedy and called the evidence in the case graphic and disturbing. But he said there is not sufficient evidence to prove that it was Ibarra, and questioned how his fingerprints could be on the phone if he was supposedly wearing gloves. "The evidence in this case is very good that Laken Riley was murdered," Kirby said. "The evidence that Jose Ibarra killed Laken Riley is circumstantial." Ibarra, who comes from Venezuela and is not a U.S. citizen, has no known connection to the student and no known violent criminal history. Instead, investigators described Laken's death as a crime of opportunity. The prosecutor presented evidence that included Ibarra's DNA under Laken Riley's fingernails and Ibarra's fingerprint on her phone screen. A medical examiner from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation told the court that Laken Riley had injuries that included scratches, bruises, and cuts on her head, neck, torso, abdomen, left arm, and left leg. Prosecutor Sheila Ross said that Ibarra hit Laken in the head with a rock, and that Laken Riley's DNA was found on 2 rocks at the crime scene. The DNA expert also testified that testing showed that a jacket that police recovered from a trash can at Ibarra's apartment complex had a bloodstain on it that tested positive for Laken Riley's DNA, and that Ibarra's DNA was also on it. Ibarra's DNA was also found under the fingernails of Laken Riley's right hand. On November 20th, 2024, Judge Patrick Haggard found Ibarra guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, granting the requests of Laken Riley's family and friends. He also sentenced him to a second life sentence and 27 years in prison to be served consecutively. Today, the integrity of our judicial process and the pursuit of justice transcended political considerations, remarked District Attorney Deborah Gonzalez, whose circuit includes Athens-Clarke County. "No sentence can undo the harm caused by Jose Ibarra's actions, but we hope it brings justice to Laken's family and the community," she added. "Our hearts remain with Laken's family and friends as they continue to grieve this tragic loss." On March 7th, 2024, the House of Representatives passed the Laken Riley Act. If enacted, the Laken Riley Act would mandate federal detention of illegal immigrants who commit burglary or theft and would allow states to file suit against the federal government for failing to enforce immigration laws. Riley had just made the Fall Dean's List and received her honorary white coat in August, symbolizing humanism, compassion, and the start of her nurse's journey, the nursing college said in a statement on Facebook. She was set to graduate in 2025. "The College of Nursing will miss Laken's spirit on campus, and our hearts go out to her family and friends," the statement said. "We know that she would have been a wonderful nurse, and her passing is a loss for the profession and the communities she would have graciously served."